with the audience. Only the
Wait,
three
are
of
we
us.
live right now?
We're live right now.
What's up? We're live. Yeah, it's true.
Watch
Oh my
yourself. All right.
god! Oh my god! Yo, Hutch, I love the way like your baldness. It's
I
kind
knew
of
he
like
was going there.
Heisenberg after you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Heisenberg after he shaved it and it's coming
Yeah.
back. I think it looks good.
Yeah, I think like I'm a little bit thicker than I used to be, so I've done a like full bald before, but I was like 6'3", 145. It's just really
Mhm.
hard to pull off like super bald when you're very skinny. But yeah, thank you,
I
man.
just
I
like
find
it.
you sexually attractive as well, just to be clear.
Yeah, I am being clear. Guys, did you hear? Unfortunately, Representative Connolly passed away. Did you hear about that?
We did. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, unironically. I tweeted about that. Maybe that could be our first topic.
Yeah. Maybe we'll save it.
We'll save it for Josiah, I guess. I was going to bring it up without Josiah, but I guess we got to wait for Josiah, I guess. Well, how about we talk about this? How about we talk about this? I talked to Hutch about it before this. All right.
Abundance?
No, not abundance. Nobody cares about that, Hutch. All right. We're talking
I
about
do.
the
I'm
big
reading it.
news. All right.
Okay.
We're talking about the big news here. I called for it a couple of shows ago. It might actually be happening. Politics, online creator, influencer boxing matches. Andrew Wilson, as you know, for those who don't know, Andrew Wilson, well-known right-wing Christian nationalist. He appears on the Whatever podcast a lot, and it seems like the theme of Andrew's appearances on the Whatever podcasts are he debates women over assorted feminist-related issues, it would seem. And at one point during one of these debates recently, he was challenged to show his manliness and open up a jar of olives, if I'm not mistaken. And he was not up to the challenge of opening this jar of olives, to the hilarity of everyone watching. Okay, obviously, as a big burly man, he should be able to open a jar of olives. Wick TV, our friend in the online content creator space, makes fun of him for like an hour on his stream over this. Andrew Wilson tweets at him and says, "I will pay you $20,000 to step into the ring with me to do a boxing match for 3 rounds." And Wick, I tweeted about this just now. He's got the exact right mindset about this, if you ask me. Look, okay, what? I might get beaten up. Who cares? I'll be $20,000 richer. Of course I'll take that money from you.
Isn't Wick former military as well? Like, does he not have some combat sort of
probably,
training?
You know,
he's
a minimal amount of combat training.
He's basically a Green Beret, but
counterpoints offered to train Wick. Could
on
be a
top of
military
that,
matchup.
what if he gets $20,000 worth of damage? You thought about that? What if he ends up getting $20,000 worth of medical bills?
He's already had to do
have
that.
Their lawyers check the releases. We're gonna need to have some medical releases. Need to have insurance involved, guys. This is a lot more complicated.
I have a lawyer check all my
releases.
It's not. Don't bring your
quick.
weird lawyer stuff into this. All right, just go into a backyard. That's what Street Beefs does. Okay, mutual combat state. Just make it happen. All right, don't involve the lawyers. Sorry, Hutch.
That's okay. Josiah, you got a little situation with your mic. It's going up and down and up and down.
What about now?
Very low.
Well, it's very low now.
A little lower.
Doing this, I fucking hate it.
That's
God
better.
damn.
That's better. Don't touch.
Isn't Andrew Wilson a chain smoker?
Look, Andrew said it best
Testing,
on
testing,
his own
testing.
Twitter. That sounds great,
That's
Josiah.
good.
Yeah,
Andrew,
Oh, no,
Andrew
went
said
well.
it best. I was gonna say Andrew said it best on his own
Andrew said it
Twitter.
best.
Somebody brought that up, and he said, "Look, if my cardio supposedly can't hold up to 3 rounds, then all the better
Testing.
for Wick." That's great, Josiah. I hear.
What
you
about
just
now?
fine.
Okay.
It sounds
Yeah.
great to me.
Fuck.
I think we're good. Yeah.
And I can't disagree with that logic. Andrew, credit to Andrew and Wick if they can actually make this happen. I cannot wait to watch it. I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be live streamed. It would be really bullshit if the cameras were turned off for such an event. I mean,
Yeah, are
I'd
they
be,
doing it at a venue, or is he
What
just
is this,
flying
the
Wick
Supreme
out to
Court?
fight in their garage, or like how's this supposed to work?
I offered to host it in my backyard. I'm being 100% genuine when I say that. That would be really funny to me.
Then everybody would know where you live.
I guess that's a good point. Maybe I'll host it in my
The
neighbor's
geolocate
backyard.
stuff is crazy. Yeah, people know exactly where you are.
But
Like,
nonetheless,
look at
though,
the sediment, look at the ground.
Flight patterns in the sky.
Yeah.
What if
Nonetheless,
there's a
though, I mean,
fatality
I'd love
on
to
your
see it.
property? How's your umbrella insurance?
just bring them into the public street, and then it's I can't be legally held liable. I think that's how that works. So
You
Is
guys
that how
thought
that works,
about-
Pisco?
No, it's not how it works. This is illegal. It's unsanctioned. I'm canceling the event. Wilson, listen, about Wilson. I'm going to call out Andrew Wilson a little bit. It's not on my usual call out, which is he won't debate me. Andrew Wilson releases a video. Well, first of all, he releases a tweet at 3 a.m. in the morning. All right. Andrew Wilson writes a tweet. Something like trans women will never be women. So like just basically shitting on trans women. So he's thinking about trans women at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then he releases a video with Just Pearly Things where he goes, "Hey, Pearl, isn't it weird? So when I ask men and women, who's the more attractive sex? They all say women, obviously. But then I ask them, well, what if you take away the augmentation? You take away the makeup, you take away the breast jobs, you take away the fucking booty lift, you take away all that shit. Now who's the more attractive race?" And it always flips. So men really naturally are more attractive, and if they got all the augmentations that women got, they would be more attractive. And so in so many words, Andrew Wilson with Pearly Things said that men were more attractive than women. And so I really think that that's something to inquire for Andrew himself.
Pretty definitive.
If you really
Are you insinuating that he's a closeted
I am
homosexual?
insinuating. Yes,
Okay.
I am
Gotcha.
insinuating that because of the
I'm
following.
with you.
If you're at 3 a.m. looking up and like talking shit about trans people, and then you go on a show and say men are naturally more attractive, I think you have some demons you have to work out. And maybe that's what this boxing match
I
is.
know why
Demons?
Pisco's doing this. Pisco's
Demons?
just trying to get his own $20,000 boxing offer from Andrew Wilson.
Okay,
and
so
frankly,
here's the
it's a
thing.
great strategy if you ask
Here's
me.
the
I do
thing.
the same thing.
I don't know Andrew Wilson's like physical background, but I met him in person. I was actually expecting like a guy built like Connor, and he's maybe a little taller than me. Like he's not super tall. He's not like super buff from what I can tell. Which
How tall are
suppose
you,
doesn't
Josiah?
mean
About
5'7".
something?
Like I ain't
Okay.
shit, right? Now Pisco on the other hand is over. Pisco's a big boy, so all else being equal, I don't know. I'd be betting on Pisco.
Yeah,
look,
rugby.
I personally if Andrew Wilson wants to offer me $20,000 to box him or preferably do MMA, because that's real fighting, boys, not boxing. Okay, I'd love to do it. All right, I'm always down to take $20,000 to get beaten up. If any MMA fighter wants to offer me the exact same thing because I'm a stupid lib, I'll take the 20 grand. I mean, why wouldn't I? I'll get beat up once a week.
Listen, your fetishes notwithstanding, I think real fighting is Aikido. That's what Steven Seagal has assured me for you. Have you guys ever, if you guys kept track of Steven Seagal, that guy,
he's like at the
fucking
victory
insane.
parade.
Bro, yeah.
Did you see that?
Yes.
It's
yeah,
in-
the
he's
cameo.
in Moscow.
Yeah.
God.
Like full Russian operative.
It's so
type.
funny.
Yeah.
Like there's this really good. I think it was Come Town who had like a series of like Steven Seagal
Yes,
film reviews.
It's one of the best clips.
Fucking hilarious. They're so funny because they point out shit like he's sniping people, but he has his sunglasses on, and like he's not. He phones it in anymore. He does all of his combat, half of it from a sitting position. God, I love it. That's so
Every
fun.
single
I will
Steven
say-
Seagal movie is just like he's like a special forces guy who has to save some damsel in distress type shit.
And
like
he's
every
pushing
one of the
70, and
movies.
it's still the case. And they point out that the
Yeah.
commanding officer in charge of the operation has to be, they have to add 10 years on that guy to be credibly Steven Seagal's commanding officer. So they get somebody who looks like what is
Joe
it?
Biden looking.
No,
commanding
yeah,
officer.
really. Like even Joe Biden will be like, "Damn, dude, it's time to retire." So we will have Crystal Ball in about 20 minutes. Crystal Ball from Breaking
Sorry.
Points, the better half
bet-
of Kyle Kalinske.
Mhm.
So we will have her here.
Our inaugural woman guest on the program. Unless
and
am
it doesn't get better than that. I mean, like that's a pretty high bar. She's one of the
That's
best
true.
in the
Took
business.
us long enough.
it's all downhill after that? No, I'm
Mhm.
sorry. I'm just
Well, finally, Pisco allowed us. Like for the longest time, we were trying to get women on the show, and Pisco was like, nah, "I want no part of that."
I'm very
And-
comfortable with that.
Yeah.
He's been fairly open about his anti-women bias.
Yeah, he's in his misogyny arc, which has lasted
Yeah.
about 28 years.
That's true.
Just it briefly ended. That's Joe's influence.
No,
there,
we
bringing
love
an end to
Crystal.
that.
We want Crystal to come on, and honestly, it's a great first inaugural female guest. I really have appreciated her coverage of the Trump administration in the last few months.
Yeah,
And
we got to
Kyle,
glaze
too.
her now. We can't have her self-esteem too high. Well, let's glaze her now.
True.
She first off, what she did to Cenk Uygur in that debate, like however many months ago that was. Ooh,
Brilliant.
Ooh, brutal.
I
was
missed
brilliant.
that debate actually.
You haven't you of all people have not reacted to that conversation.
I have not seen that conversation now.
That's
But I'll
like
tell you
Hutch
what
premium
though,
content.
as the resident moderate on this, I fucking hate that I have this like reputation on the pod now as the
Centrist,
moderate. But
some might say.
as the
I
resident
think
fucking
conservative at this point. Okay.
as the
Center right,
resident
center right.
as the resident conservative on this podcast, I am so happy to build coalitions with people who like got the homework for the Trump administration. I am like perfectly willing to put any like past disagreements to the side if we're like on the same page about this thing here. So
This
but
is
yeah,
like
no,
the Council
we're
of
gonna
Elrond.
get her
This
on
is-
abundance. Hang on, we got to get her on abundance right out the gate just to fuck with Hutch. Just to
No, guys, be
I'm halfway
normal.
through the book, and I gotta say, I might be an abundance lib.
Oh my God! Of course. Wait, can I just say this is like the Council of Elrond for the dwarves?
Well,
and
I
the
got to
elves
be
and
honest with
everything.
you, and I said this to, I think it was either in your chat, Pisco, or it was in Straighter Aids. It was in Aaron's live stream, or no, it was in your stream, and then Aaron yelled at me. I thought, as much love as I have for Sam Cedar, there's no question that Ezra Klein won that conversation. He made the better case for abundance than Sam Cedar did in opposition. So
Wait, Pisco, you read that book and you don't like that book? Is that what you're saying?
I have complicated thoughts about it. I have complicated thoughts about it. That's all I'll say. I think that there are some absolutely like, right diagnoses of issues that he identifies, which is, one of the themes of the book is supply. There's a supply issue there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's that controversial. And I think it's an insight that more politicians need to have. I like some of the diagnoses of what has gone wrong in a few different places, but some of the examples I don't like. And I find it a little bit deceptive, or I don't know if deceptive is the right word, but wrong when he lays this all in the feet of like a regulatory democratic a series of democratic governments, because some of the key examples that he points to
have been
are from
refuted.
Republicans.
Yeah, have been
refuted or from Republicans. So for example, he points to the California, one of the environmental policies from California passed into law by Ronald Reagan, points to a bunch of environmental regulation, and query whether or not it makes sense to keep those, right? Or just to have waivers for certain building things. And those were implemented by Richard Nixon. And so to the extent that this is like expose on Democrats, I think that a lot of the quote unquote blame is misplaced.
Yeah, the one
and
was
lies
the
at the feet
rollout of President Biden's broadband initiative as part of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, that's not in the book, but it's in a lot of their advertisements about the
their
book.
press
Yeah.
related to it, and it was refuted. Somebody says here, let me find the comment.
Did you read the book Josiah and Econoboy yet?
No, it's on my list.
Okay.
No,
it's
no,
it's pretty short. I mean, I'm listening to it on audiobook, but it's like only like 7.5 hours.
So Matthew says you should get Francesca Fiorentini on Live and Learn. I'd love that, and I'm sure she would accept. She's ferocious. Yeah.
I was gonna say though, like I feel like even though the book I feel like the reason why they focus on the Democrats in that book wasn't to suggest that it's exclusively like Democratic governance that's causing these problems. It was more, to me, it felt like they were focusing on that because they are Democrats and they're looking to reform the party.
They say that, but at the same time, there is something particular about like, why have Democrats failed us? Why are Democrats not doing a good job governing? And so, yeah, I understand that their criticisms are more tailored to the Democrats for many reasons, including they don't consider Republicans fellow travelers. And so they don't feel like they're going to find common cause in some of the environmental issues and because of the post-election stuff. I agree on that. But it is purporting to be an expose on everything the Democrats have objectively done wrong in governance. And I think that you should calibrate your criticisms of that.
Obviously, though, I mean, I think that what you're saying is true, Pisco. Like when you say, oh, like CEQA was a law that was passed by Reagan, but Democrats have held substantially a supermajority in California for like 20 years now, right? And I mean, they've had every opportunity to reform these laws and make them not terrible, and they've chosen not to. I mean, many Democratic. I mean, look at there Karen Bass over in L.A., the mayor of Los Angeles, right? She made the statement that she basically thinks that building more housing just like doesn't cause housing to go down in price, right? Which is clearly just sort of an ideological black hole that she's gone down, right? And it's the exact wrong ideology for a city like Los Angeles, which is struggling substantially with housing affordability and with homelessness. So, I mean, I think to me, the biggest critiques of abundance have been some of the offhand comments that Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson have been quoted as. I find, they were criticized for it. I find the criticism does seem reasonable, where they had said something like, Elon Musk is a perfect example of when public funding meets private genius, and it's like, I don't think that's true for a number of reasons.
He's too friendly. They're too friendly with these guys. They're too friendly with these like dark MAGA tech people. I don't like it. It makes me feel as though there's something there.
Yeah, and they do. I think they do kind of like shoo away the conversation about the welfare state and distribution, which is
they're uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of quotes that I read, which was something like, for too long, Democrats have been overly concerned with the parceling of the present, right? These distributional concerns. And it's like, bro, first of all, I don't know what Democratic Party you're talking about, okay? Because I think we could probably stand to have much more of that conversation in the Democratic Party, not less. But nonetheless, I mean, that's not a bad conversation to have for a consistent period of time. And then they also talked about how, Democrats for a long time have measured their success in governance based on how similar to the Nordic welfare states they can get, almost saying like, that's the wrong focus. And it's like, look, I just don't think that's true. I mean, that seems like a very reasonable focus, which is perfectly compatible with the abundance agenda. It's just that.
Well, yeah. I mean,
we lose.
No agenda.
Oh, okay.
But it does.
Well, yeah, you froze for a second there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, it does seem like in their interviews, they talk about the compatibility of these messages, but it seems like in the book, there's a couple instances where it seems like you really want to pull the party into a different direction and not really have this sort of like pluralist approach, which seems kind of bad on the political front and the economic.
Joe, just real quick before Hutch responds, just because so I don't lose this comment. So I know we're going to get Joe on in the next couple of weeks, and she says, I mean, the fact of the matter
wildly
is
incorrect
laws
about this one, Joe.
Are not the holdup. Republicans are using enviro law to file malicious lawsuits are the problem. If you get rid of those laws, they will pivot. So I think she'll have, because I know she's read the book and she's gone into it in vivid detail, and hopefully by that point, Hutch will have concluded his reading. I'm making no promises because the next book on my list is Leah Lippman from Strict Scrutiny just dropped a book about the Supreme Court. And they will always take precedence. Any book bitching about the current Supreme Court will always take precedence over anything else. So we should be able to have a good conversation there.
Well, I'm only about halfway through the book, and I would much rather wait until I've fully finished it before to get into like a fleshed out conversation. But so far in the book, it's mostly about just identifying what the problem is. And I don't know if anybody could like deny that the housing scarcity is directly contributing to the cost of housing being so prohibitive in blue cities and states. And so that to me doesn't feel like super controversial. Like the fact that it takes on average like 5 years to build a house in Los Angeles seems to be an issue. You can have a city like Houston where the median cost for a house there is like $350,000. And that's like a major city, and I live in obviously Southern California, and so it's like $2 million here. So I mean, like, yeah, I feel like if there's ways that we can bring these costs down or talk about the problem, then we probably should be doing that. But
yeah,
yeah,
I'm just worried about like the implications of listen. There's no question, like no state is governed perfectly, and blue states do have their issues. My concern, as I mentioned in the previous Live and Learn, is the implications for the next census and the reapportionment of government seats. I think Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson have separately made a compelling case that that's a real issue for us. I know Conaboy isn't quite as concerned about it, but I'm definitely the Chicken Little of the group. The sky is falling, so I will gladly assume the worst, and I think that's something.
No, they definitely talk about that in the book. They talk about the flight from these blue cities, and Well,
I wanted to touch on that just for a quick second because people are often confused by my salt cap take. That for those of you who are not aware, currently there's a great deal of negotiation in the budget. The Republicans about whether or not to increase the salt cap. Before there was no cap on the amount you were able to itemize the amount you pay to state and local taxes, and people are surprised that I say things like, "Hey, like I think that the salt cap is a bad idea." The reason is one of the things I think that contributes to the flight of wealth from Democratic states and cities is the fact that we've now capped the amount of deductions they get on state and local taxes. And I think that where it's a genius move by the Republicans to implement a salt tax, because people think, oh, of course, like it's going to affect rich people. And so we should, if we're going to be progressive, we should cap the salt tax or get rid of it entirely and say that you can't deduct, your high taxes from state and local contexts. But I think getting rid of the salt cap disincentivizes progressive tax schemes on the state level. And that's where a lot of taxing occurs. And that's where a lot of experimentation happens. And so when you get rid of the SALT cap, when you implement a SALT cap, you're incentivizing and making it more expensive for these rich people to live in these states and making unsustainable, I think, eventually their progressive tax schemes. And I think that was the intention of a lot of these Republican legislators, as well as to target blue states. And so that I think it's counterproductive or counterintuitive, but you should be in favor of getting rid of the SALT cap.
Trump all but admitted to that yesterday when he went to Capitol Hill to try to pressure holdouts into backing the big, beautiful bill. I mean, he said explicitly that a lot of these provisions are designed to benefit Republican governors and Republican states. He said it. He's like, I don't want to benefit. He calls him, J.B. Pritzker and Governor Newsom. So and he didn't say the SALT provision specifically, but that's almost certainly what he is, referring to. So he's just very transparent about it. He's trying to keep things in there that's going to screw over blue states, and it's just that in and of itself. I mean, it doesn't get nearly enough attention. Imagine if a Democratic president were to say anything like that about putting in provisions to attack red states.
Target red states.
I mean, that's just standard with him. That's just standard with him. Like with the tax bill in 2017, I think there were provisions that like specifically targeted like benefits for red states, and like in California, I think it disproportionately negatively affected us in some way. Econoboy, you're probably more up to date on like.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, to Pisco's point, I think it's correct to say that the Republicans are being almost entirely bad faith when they're talking about the progressivity of getting rid of essentially getting rid of state and local tax deduction, or at the very least capping the amount that you can deduct from your taxes. I mean, essentially, to simplify it for the audience, if you have a high tax state, you pay $10,000 a year in taxes in one state, only $3,000 in another. Then obviously by capping the amount that you're allowed to deduct, you're making the high tax state a little bit less livable, a little bit more expensive, right? I think that the problem with that, though, however, is that, although it's arrived at bad faith from Republicans, there's also a lot of Democrats that are in favor of getting rid of state and local tax deductions. And I think that economically speaking, it is highly regressive to have state and local tax deductions. And, when it comes to, when we start to think about like, okay, like how should states be financed, and what should the books of states look like? Well, the way that so many blue states finance themselves and what they do with their money is highly unproductive, right? Both their taxes are inefficient, but then also what they spend their money on is also highly inefficient. I think that a lot of Republican states, they kind of like they sort of like walked ass backwards into a more kind of well-governed state level administration of things, not on the welfare state, but specifically with regards to how they regulate zoning and building. Tends to be better in Republican states just because they don't really tend to regulate that stuff at all. So you end up getting more development. They don't tend to pay for a lot of things. So you end up getting less taxes, or you get more efficient taxes like property taxes and sales taxes. The truth is probably every state should be governed in that fundamental way. Now, obviously, to Pisco's point, I think that states in general should provide for some amount of welfare and some amount of distribution and sort of public ownership. But the state and local tax deduction is just a very bad way to do that, if you ask me.
The cost of living specifically within the economy, I think, is like within like the subcategories of like the broad economy category. I think the cost of living is like top of list for most people. It ranks like really high at the on the list of issues that concern voters. And when I looked up the top 10 states for housing development in this country, I wanted to fucking vomit. There was only one blue state on that list. It was Texas, Florida, fucking North Carolina, Georgia, and like number 9 was Colorado. Colorado was the only blue state that was on that list. So
yeah, and I mean that's not like, I don't think that that's like Republican administrations that are saying we want to have efficient building of housing and that's why we effectively regulated this. It's just that it just happens to be the case. Like, okay, for instance, they talk about solar energy development in Texas versus California. Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein do. Texas, the administration of Texas, the government of Texas, is actively opposed to developing solar and wind, right? But the problem that so many Republican politicians have
audio is an issue. Wait a minute. Audio?
I don't think so.
Yeah, chat's saying this. Like 3 different people in chat.
Oh no.
Whose audio is an issue? Can you guys?
Who's the problem?
Yeah.
They're saying refresh for audio. Yeah, maybe it's on the YouTube side. Anyway, I was just going to say that they're actively opposed to building more renewables in the state of Texas, but policymakers in Texas also, generally speaking, believe in having, less regulations on building. And insofar as you just say, hey, we have a low regulation state when it comes to building things, what's going to get built? Well, the cheapest form of energy, right? Which is solar energy right now. And so that's why a state like Texas can build pretty much as much solar as California, even though one administration in theory wants solar to be built and the other one is diametrically opposed to it. The regulatory state really matters on these things.
So two
You
things.
get
real
one
quick.
guy
Kyle,
so easily.
Crystal just sent me a message saying it'll be another 20 minutes because Kyle is sick and had to run to CVS. So I guess she went with him. So I just said that's fine. We're chit chatting. As far as keep getting these comments. I feel your boys are going to wuss out and not press Crystal because she has a big platform. I don't even know what that means. If we
Press her
disagree
on
with
what?
Crystal, that's fine. But she has evolved in her thinking with respect to electoral politics. She's been attacking Republicans left, right, and center. She's admitted that resistance libs were right about Donald Trump, and she's looking to coalition build with people who are not quite as left as she is. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I think this is great, and as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I'm happy to talk with her about anything. But if you expect us to spend the next hour bitching at her, you're insane.
I feel like the
wrong
guests.
fucking place.
I feel like the guests that we've had on so far, none of us have had a problem voicing disagreements with them. Even
Brad Palumbo conversation.
I spoke with him today, actually. Yeah, and
Somebody said that he was trying to reach out to me, but I've not heard from him, even though we're.
Oh, he's not reaching out to this guy, okay? Because he knows he doesn't want to talk to me about the welfare state. God damn it, no libertarian does. Never forget. Sorry, I just always have to throw that in there because the welfare state is so sacred. But
so we'll probably have an hour with her when she gets in. But let's. I'm curious, some other things you guys might want to talk about because I know we've got a lot to talk about with her. But go ahead.
We have the unfortunate passing of Jerry Connolly. We wanted to discuss real quick, Econoboy, with you involved as well.
I don't know if
age of 74.
Yeah, I don't know if Crystal would want to talk about this. I mean, I tweeted about it recently that, look, I mean, when it comes to the three Democrats in the House,
talk about this. She will abso-fucking-lutely want to talk about it. That's fine.
Well,
when she gets here, she can have the mic.
When it comes to the three Democrats this year who have died of cancer, right, which is a really insane thing to think about. It's to me, it's just a little ridiculous because when it comes to Sylvester Turner and Raul Grijalva and Jerry Connolly, people all knew that these people had these serious conditions, right? This isn't even an example where it's like, okay, take Nancy Pelosi. I think she's probably too old. She should probably retire, but she seems able-bodied. She seems like, I don't think she's not on death's door as far as I can tell. But these three guys had serious health issues that were known to the public and at the very least well-known to insiders. And for some reason, Democrats, again, just no, let's not rock the boat. We don't want to push a guy out. And of course, the impact that I talk about it here is we go from 220 to 215 to 220 to 212, which is the difference between a guy like Thomas Massie and Chip Roy maybe being able to sort of transitively stop these cuts because they can't get anything passed, to all of a sudden the Republicans can just ram something through because now they have a majority of 8 instead of 5.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, I know. Look, I think it's fair to say that as far as elder statesmen of the Democratic Party are concerned, Jerry Connolly was a good one. I mean, it's not like he was a bulldog. If you see him in House Oversight hearings, it's not like he pulled his punches. He was respected by AOC. He respected her as well. So, definitely an ally. But God damn it, yeah, it's genuinely. It is between President Biden seeking to run for re-election, Jerry Connolly not only seeking to run for re-election, but also not letting AOC, not backing AOC for the oversight position. This is just it is hubris. It is disgusting because it's bigger than them. And I definitely try not to attack. Even when I criticize Democrats, I mean, I try to do it with a degree of respect. But this isn't about you. It's not about you. And if your personal ambition clashes with the overall health of the party, fuck your ambition. Nobody cares. You are irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And I think I'm supposed to have a conversation next week with Representative, is it Krishnamurthy, who was on here for Live and Learn that I wasn't there. So we're gonna have a conversation, and he's running for Senate now. So he's probably coming back so we can have a longer form conversation. But I plan to talk with him about this. You guys got to get it together. young blood, which is talented and healthy, is more important than the ambitions of elder statesmen. Now, if you're, Sheldon Whitehouse is my favorite senator, and I don't know how old he is. I assume he's in his mid 60s, right? Like, I'm not saying he's got to go anytime soon, but like, this shit needs to be front of mind, especially with, like you said, 3 Democrats dying of cancer or dying period since inauguration or since the last year's election.
Well, I mean, remember back to Dianne Feinstein, who, but I mean, that was another situation where it seemed very, very clear. Not only was she too old to probably be running for re-election, she ran for re-election. Now, she did have a credible Democratic opponent in that election. She won that election ultimately. But then when almost as soon as we get into her term, she starts dying of essentially dementia and, these age-related diseases. And Democrats, even though it was stalling progress on getting judges into their seats, it was just like, wait a minute. What are we supposed to do?
This is where I'm going to push back a little bit. And this is where somebody like Sheldon Whitehouse came in handy quite a bit. So like, I was initially on the train of, after she won re-election and she was seated, and she was missing all those hearings because of her health, I was also of the mind like, okay, kick her ass out. But as Sheldon Whitehouse pointed out, if they had done that, Republicans could and would have denied unanimous consent to fill her vacancy and allow somebody to take her place on the Judiciary Committee. They had the numbers to do that. Now, and this is where I told Senator Whitehouse the first time I interviewed him, I was like, I am so grateful that you put that out there because I and everyone else were confused. Hey, Zach and Gavin, she's going to be here in like 15 minutes. She said that Kyle is sick, and so that's why she's not here yet.
Am I crazy, though? Because she died in office, and her seat ended up getting filled anyway, right?
After she died. Okay, but the point is, like, the Republicans said that if you kick her off the Judiciary Committee or expel her from Congress, they would deny unanimous consent to fill her vacancy. Now, once she died, they scrounged up enough dignity to allow, and I can't remember who it was. It's not also Brooks. Who was it who was appointed to fill her seat temporarily?
I can't remember his name, but I
thought it was a woman. Yeah, but anyway, they did allow somebody to take her place, but only after she died. And so this is also why Democrats in these situations really need to be front and center, explaining to people publicly and loudly why they're not doing the obvious thing if they have a good fucking reason to do it. And Whitehouse was the only one who gave an answer to that. So
it is pathetic. It's completely pathetic that Pelosi is going to be running again in California. She's in her in her 80s now. This, like, your best ability as a congressperson is availability. You need to show up. And we can't have you fucking dying in the middle of office. If there's an accident, whatever, unforeseen, that's something. But like, if it is predictable that you're going to be, facing some kind of health crisis, put aside the notion that you might die. Going through cancer treatment, anyone who's had a family member who has had a cancer treatment, it takes everything out of you. Your day-to-day becomes pain management. I feel really bad for the former president, Joe Biden, in terms of his diagnosis, but his day-to-day is going to get much different than pre-diagnosis, assuming they didn't lie to us about when he was diagnosed. And by the way, I don't put that as something that's impossible. I never bought into this theory of the grand media cover-up that a lot of people try to put out there. But if you read, or I haven't read Jake Tapper's book, but he does have some interviews out there.
Wait, Jake Tapper wrote a book?
Oh yeah, Jake Tapper wrote a book.
Sorry, he only reminds you every 5 fucking minutes. It's the end of every sentence.
It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But some of the insiders, some of the close people to Joe Biden, his key advisors, his senior advisors, some of the stuff that they were doing was absolutely shameless, malpractice, completely horrible, despicable. They essentially handed Donald Trump victory in this election. And I am so tired of having these old geezers and this boomerism dominate the Democratic Party. They need to get out of the fucking way, or we're going to be stuck with like fresh MAGA conservatives for the rest of our lives.
In a way, it's a little blackpilling because, like, for all intents and purposes, he seems like he was a very decent man. He had a good track record. He had a good voting record.
Yep.
And, I would rather be having a conversation about just like his legacy or whatever. But the urgency of this moment, I think necessitates the conversation that we're having here.
It's just a failure of leadership, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's like, look, being a good leader and being a good sort of representative of your constituents is not just, knowing the best things to do for the people that you represent. It's also knowing when to step down and when someone else is probably better from a structural standpoint. And I think it's not, and I don't think it's just like, I know, Josiah, you mentioned the thing about there may have been some mechanical reasons why Democrats were hesitant on this, but it just seems clear to me that whether there's a mechanical excuse for Democrats to use or not, they are very hesitant to
Well,
call
no, there was a
upon either
mechanical
private.
reason.
Yeah.
There was a mechanical reason once it had gotten to that point where she won re-election, she was seated, she was put on the committee. Then they were screwed because if they kicked her off the committee, Republicans would not have allowed her to be replaced because it would have allowed President Biden to confirm more judicial nominees. They were very upfront about it. That point, there was a mechanical hurdle, which gives them an excuse. But she shouldn't have run for re-election in the first place. And had she won a re-election, she shouldn't have been seated on the Judiciary Committee, a committee that needed to be that active and agile.
Yeah, the Feinstein example was particularly egregious because she was so like physically deteriorated by the end there.
I mean, my presumption
and it sullies
is
her
just
legacy. It sullies her legacy, just like RBG. Like it sullies their legacy, and even Connolly right now, their legacy is now going to be defined by their failure to give up power. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had the opportunity. Just by the way, as I'll add, someone else did. Sonia Sotomayor. Now, Sonia Sotomayor is sharp as a tack. I say that and I'm laughing because that's what they said.
She a dynamo behind the scenes.
She's behind the scenes. No, but she actually is very incredibly smart and incredibly sharp. But I will say, she absolutely should have stepped down while Biden was office, while we had the Senate, so we could have some 30-year-olds straight out of fucking Columbia Law School to just be the Supreme Court, Associate Justice. And it sullies RBG's legacy. It sullies Dianne Feinstein's legacy, and now it will sully Jerry Connolly and Joe Biden's.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before about how, look, if these politicians, if these people aren't willing to do this, then it needs to be done for them, right? You need to have Democrats who are willing to come out in public and just say, look, I mean, I really think these people need to resign and really start to create public pressure for that to happen.
I know David Hogg tried to do.
Well, no, I mean, look, I have every reason to think that if a Democrat came out and said Sonia Sotomayor should have resigned when Biden, was president in the Senate, that they would be lambasted and that people would be really pissed off about that. Sotomayor wouldn't like it. It would create kind of a lot of, you could say, like, culture clash within the caucus. But it's just like, it just kind of needs to be said at a certain point. Like, you have to be willing to put pressure on people to do the right thing. You can't just always speak nicely and have a fucking tea party with people and just sign, agree to disagree about the faith, that people have in our nation's most valuable institutions. Agree to disagree, even though it results in millions of people losing their Medicaid coverage. Like, this is important stuff. And it's bizarre that Democrats are so flippant about this kind of stuff.
Our RBG wrote a letter like towards the end of her, like right at the end. And in the letter, she said, my dying wish is that you wait to fill that seat until after the election. And Donald Trump immediately was like, we're not going to do that. And
Bro,
imagine
what the look on McConnell's face once he read that part in the letter, it's just, and then probably shredded it like Cersei, towards the end of season 1.
This will protect you. I have another pop culture reference to compare there. Do you guys remember? Did you read the Deathly Hallow book, Harry Potter: The Deathly Hallow?
Yeah,
can't read.
The movie.
The author's name is J.K. Rowling. She's actually had some problematic beliefs, but anyway, guys. Voldemort goes to Dumbledore's grave, breaks it open, and grabs the Elder Wand. And his internal monologue is like, "Did Dumbledore really think that like a grave, that the respect for the dead was going to stop me from taking the Elder Wand?" It's the same shit here. You can't count on the Republicans to respect your dying wish. And
I hate to nerd out on you, bro. I'm sorry. I hate to nerd somebody in the chat said spoiler. That's fucking funny.
Oh shit.
No, I hate to nerd out on you, but that's actually a bad example because that actually backfired on Voldemort. See, in order to win possession of the Elder Wand, you have to defeat the rightful owner in a fair duel, which Lord Voldemort never did because it was Draco Malfoy who disarmed Dumbledore right before Professor Snape killed Dumbledore.
We are getting real deep into spoilers here, guys, just for the record.
I mean, this book is so new.
Come on, guys. It's like spoiling fucking the Odyssey or something. Harry Potter's like 25 years old at this point. Let's be real, guys.
Yeah.
But no, it's a huge problem, and there's a reckoning happening right now. And I feel for the former president with his prostate cancer diagnosis, but it is for me a fabulous domestic agenda. If you start to read all of the reports about who was making those decisions for Joe Biden, it was worse than we thought. And it seems like a lot of his great accomplishments domestically were done by like Ron Klain unilaterally and done by like his senior advisors unilaterally. And Biden still gets credit. You know, he appointed them, and obviously better than Trump would have done. And who you appoint, you know, personnel is policy. And so I don't take that away from Biden, but it just goes to show you that like we need, when you compare Biden to Obama, say what you want about Obama in terms of being present there for the moment. I just watched, there's a Netflix documentary called Manhunt for Osama bin Laden. Obama is getting updates every second, every 2 seconds. He's in the Situation Room. He is very much involved in like the meat and potatoes of the hunt for Osama bin Laden in a way that I just
in that documentary.
The CIA, obviously.
Why'd you hesitate, Pisco?
The CIA.
Fucking traitor. Yeah, no, it's the cancer diagnosis thing. Like, I was away at a rock concert, rock festival in Maryland, and I was actually pretty diligent about staying away from politics because I knew I'd drive myself nuts not being able to do content about it. And I happened to get a pop-up alert saying, you know, President Biden was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I'm curious, before we switch topics while we're still waiting on Crystal, what you all think of the right-wing reaction to it? Because there were a lot of unhinged parts, to be sure, but I was actually surprised by the obviously performative, we wish him well. I was expecting them to be more blatantly unhinged about that. What do you all think?
To have the president, I mean, the president, when he like, it's such a layup question for someone in that spot. You just say, oh, we're so sorry to hear this news. We're praying for them, blah, blah, blah. It's like the standard politician thing. It's the easiest question to answer. And he still couldn't help himself but to like inject politics into it and be like, they should have told us. They're keeping it a secret. And then Don Jr.'s tweet was especially fucking disgusting when he joked that Dr. Jill Biden didn't detect his cancer. I don't know. For me, that was like super blackpilling the reaction to his cancer diagnosis, and it wasn't just from right wingers. Just to be clear,
no, it wasn't. It wasn't. But that, but that's the thing. Like well, I'll give my opinion in a second. But was anybody else, Hutch aside, what did you all think of the reaction to Biden's diagnosis?
I mean, I thought it was. I mean, I don't. It's not really surprising to me. I mean, we are in a very polarized time, and I mean, I have every reason to suspect that if Trump got diagnosed with cancer, you see some unhinged shit on Twitter, from people on the left, from probably some establishment Democrats, right?
That's fair.
That's just the times that we live in. It doesn't make it right or wrong, but I mean,
my
reaction was just like, I'm not surprised people are being unhinged. Like, people are unhinged about all kinds of shit.
That's the thing. I want to be clear because I'll weigh in on this after Pisco, but I'm not talking about were you personally offended. I was actually surprised at the level of performative sympathy. Marjorie Taylor Greene was like, wow, this is really tragic. That's why I'm curious. Like, did the reaction match what you expected in these times, given who Joe Biden was to these people, right and left?
I mean, it doesn't surprise. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I think that they're going to do whatever's self-serving, and they have no reason to be mean about it because they're not principled. What they care about is power. And so what do they get out of being assholes? Those individuals, the ones who are assholes, either are because they do so reflexively, or because they're trying to get an angle which isn't directly targeted at Biden, but more the Democratic institution, and basically saying that they're all in on some massive conspiracy, and therefore you can't trust them on anything. And so they did exactly what I expected, which is they were motivated by their self-interest, and that's what they did.
Well, Don Jr. led with like one of those performative posts. Like, he quote retweeted somebody else who was like prayers for the family or whatever. And then he quote retweeted with like 100%. And like 3 hours later, he's cracking jokes about Jill Biden missing the cancer. It's another one of those examples of like, I don't know if it's they're being like willfully dishonest about it, or they actually believe that there's not this insane double standard, but they were up in arms because there were people cracking jokes about the firefighter who died during the assassination attempt, which we talked about, I think, on this podcast. Like, I wouldn't make jokes about that kind of stuff, but at the same time, these were the same people that were cracking jokes about Paul Pelosi's head being smashed in with a fucking hammer and him landing in the ICU. And so, it is a sign that things are so deeply polarized that you see these kinds of responses. And
damn, I hit the
it's
wrong
like
button.
Probably better not to look at social media when that happens. But yeah, what's up, Crystal?
Hey y'all, how's it going?
Better than Kyle, it sounds like. How's
Yeah.
our boy doing?
He's
How's he
okay.
feeling?
We've had like some kind of virus situation going through the house, so it was his turn.
Is it the woke mind virus?
That's what it is, actually. Yeah, we're affirmatively spreading that through our household. So
That's good. That's
It
good.
herd immunity. You should have parties where everybody gets sick.
there you
Yes.
go.
People
Work
are
on
gonna
that.
Be like, was he vaxxed? That's what people are gonna ask.
Classic.
Well, listen, welcome to Live and Learn. I'm not sure who all. I know you've interacted with Pisco, Hutch, and myself.
Yep.
The gentleman in the center here is our resident economist, Econoboy.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
So let's get into it. So there's a lot going on, Crystal. And what was funny was before you got here, we were trying to figure out what to chat about because there's so much to talk about. And they were like, I don't know if Crystal will want to talk about the death of Jerry Connolly. And I almost choked on my Diet Pepsi. I'm like, I bet you she has a lot to fucking say about Representative Connolly. So why don't you give us your thoughts about his his death and what this means for the Democratic Party?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first I'll say the human thing, which is I don't know if you guys know, I ran for Congress in 2010 in Virginia, and most of the Democratic caucus in Virginia were total assholes to me because I was 28 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. They knew I was going to lose because I was running this super Republican district in a Tea Party year. So to name names, Mark Warner, Terry McAuliffe, those types were just total assholes to me. Jerry Connolly was very kind, on a human level. So, I just want to say, very sorry to his friends and his family and the people around him that loved him. Zooming out from him as a human being, I mean, what can you say about a party that serves as basically a Make-A-Wish Foundation for elderly members rather than wanting to actually win? And at a time when we have a fascist government, when the risks to the country are as grave as they could possibly be, and it's not like they didn't know that he was an elderly man who had a cancer diagnosis when the party elites, especially I think Nancy Pelosi, really put the hammer down. But everybody who voted for him to be ranking member on oversight over AOC, who knows how to hold people accountable, knows how to get media attention, is young, doesn't have cancer. Every one of those people should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. And if it was a one-off, okay. But let's talk about Dianne Feinstein. Let's talk about the fact the last 8 members who have died in office were all Democrats. This has become so much more about whose turn it is and their own personal goals and self-fulfillment wishes than it is about actually doing what you need to do in a moment when we need everybody to be doing what they need to do. So that is what I think about it.
They're still doing it. And they're still doing it. Pelosi's running for another term, or she's planning to run for another term in California.
Clyburn, same thing.
They're not learning. I mean, these are 80-year-olds.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen.
So they're median age Democratic lawmakers. What do you guys have against that? I mean, they still have another 50 years left in them.
And you have, David Hogg comes in, is like, hey, maybe we should do something different. They're like, how dare you? We're going to excommunicate you from the DNC. I mean, it's just, I think it speaks to, on some level, maybe they mean the things they say when they talk about the threat of Donald Trump and of Republicans, but they don't act like it. Many of them don't. There are some, right? There are some that do. But when you see the way a Chuck Schumer behaves, when you see the way a Hakeem Jeffries behaves, when you see, them propping up Jerry Connolly and not putting forward their best players, you just have to say, you people aren't serious. And it ties into the Joe Biden conversation as well.
Yeah.
Same thing, where because of his own ego and then these aides around him who this is their whole lifeblood and they like having the power. And one of them was apparently making $4 million freaking dollars from the campaign.
Mike Donnellan.
Woo! Yeah. Who's been with Joe Biden, who was with Joe Biden forever. Right. And they had this very tight inner circle. And, you came into office saying your one major goal was to make sure you end the era of Trumpism, and you usher in this guy back into office, stronger, more virulent, more extreme, more terrifying than he's ever been before.
Yeah. And I mean, so much of his, one of the things I know that Kyle's been relentless on, and I think you've been defending as well, we certainly defend it here, is that President Biden's domestic agenda, his domestic accomplishments were the least neoliberal and the
Yeah.
most progressive in modern American history. And he's potentially pissed all of that away.
That's right.
Because Trump is going to undo as much of it as possible. And even the stuff that's not undone, Trump will take credit for, obviously. And the American people who have the memory of goldfish are probably going to be inclined to give him that credit. And then even the stuff that he gets done and he'll get credit for, it's going to be bracketed by, he did not know when to relinquish his grip on power in time. And so he's going to be seen as almost like a speed bump, a brief speed bump in between Trump terms.
His legacy is bringing back Trump and overseeing genocide in
Yep.
Gaza. That's his legacy.
Wow. Yeah. So
we're speaking to a problem it seems like both structural and cultural in terms of the power that's entrenched in DC right now. And I'm just asking myself, like, well, how would you want to take this issue on, like from within the system itself? And so, like, what is it going to take to get them to sort of reevaluate the priorities in terms of seniority and these sorts like presumptions of like those sorts of things? Like how do you attack this problem? Is it AOC getting in front of a microphone and making the case? Like, how does this movement start in the first place?
Well, in that way, I'm actually somewhat hopeful because I think that the base of the party, this is the first time the base of the party is like sees the problems and has really turned negative on Democratic Party leadership. And you see way more criticism in, mainstream liberal outlets, places like MSNBC. You guys, you see way more criticism than you ever saw before. And so I think that is actually really hopeful because that's the only answer is for these people's, to be defeated, for there to be some intra-party dissent. I think people like AOC have been sort of more vocal also in their criticism than they used to be. And, the other piece that ties into this is I truly believe one of the, some of the core rot that has led us in our political system to where we are, both, with the Democratic Party, but also on a larger scale with like Elon Musk owning the government and all of this cadre of oligarchs around Donald Trump. I mean, money in politics really has contributed to so much of what we see in our political landscape. And, I think that has to be dealt with really seriously. But to start with, the 2028 Democratic primary is going to be important. These primaries coming up in 2026 are going to be important. The voice of the Democratic base and what they want to see out of these leaders is going to be important. And on all those fronts, I'm actually pretty hopeful.
do you think, speaking of AOC and obviously Accountable with Pisco, if you have questions, go ahead and jump in. But on the topic of AOC, do you expect that she will try to challenge Chuck Schumer in 2026, or that she'll keep her powder dry for a presidential run in 2028? Because people have been speculating about both. And I'll say, just as far as Schumer's concerned, there's at least some preliminary polling indicating that she might do pretty well against him.
I think she would. And this,
Schumer's up in 28. In 28, he's up.
Oh, he's
That's what I thought.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I thought he was 26.
I don't know. I don't have any special insight, but I suspect she's probably positioning to run for president, would be my guess. And especially with, you had the thing that really convinced me. I don't know if you guys saw a few weeks back, she put out some highly produced, almost like presidential launch video that had Bernie Sanders really kind of endorsing her. He's clearly handing the movement off to her. And I'm someone who up until very recently, I would have been extremely skeptical of that for her. I think she went too far in the direction of the woke language and the faculty all the kind of off-putting focus on identity politics. I think she went too far in that direction. I think she has really stepped into the void in a way that has impressed me in Trump 2.0, in a way that not many people have. I think the messaging has been spot on. Clearly the energy is there. And so, I'm more intrigued by that for her than I would have ever expected to be.
Well, with Kamala, I feel like that was arguably her biggest problem, is because she was clearly pivoting to the center, but she had this established, she ran to the left of Bernie Sanders in 2020. And a lot of people felt like her
On
shift
culture.
was disingenuous. That was the perception. And so for someone like AOC, who there are so many other quotes of her, taking these very left-wing positions. I like if that was the thing that did in Kamala, what is AOC going to have to do to sort of like shed that baggage?
Well, I would say they're very different characters. I mean, just in terms of political talent, I think anyone would have to acknowledge like they're not even in the
Yeah,
same
100%.
league. In understanding of media and the new media ecosystem, they're not even in the same league. And then the other thing is with
And perceived
Kamala,
authenticity, not to interrupt, but perceived authenticity too. That
correct.
a lot of like Trump supporters, like it's a phenomenon. With the split voter between AOC and Trump, people say that although Trump's the biggest liar in any out of any politician in modern history, they see that these people are genuine.
Right. And I
Bannon
think
praised
that
her.
is the key point, because people with Kamala, she's just like, even within her own campaign in 2020, you say she ran to the left of Bernie Sanders. It's like, well, which part of the campaign are we talking about? She launched being like, I'm for Medicare for all. And then some donors were like, well, don't do that. And she's like, I'm not for Medicare for all. It was very obvious that her goal was to get herself into office and that she didn't have a lot of core views that she was willing to fight for. And so I don't doubt, Hutch, that there will be, quotes from AOC, abolish ICE, although I think that was kind of vindicated
this
in this
point,
moment, but
at
that's
least.
another discussion. But, she has been out on a limb on all those issues. And I don't doubt that those are going to be things that she's going to have to grapple with in a primary. But I don't see her running away and completely like changing her whole, all her colors in this moment either. Like, people feel like, okay, she's a progressive, like that's basically who she is. And so that authenticity piece I think is important. We actually, Josiah, did some focus group testing of those AOC Trump voters, and it was very, very interesting. A surprising number of them told us that they felt like there was just this sort of like general anti-establishment kind of a vibe of like, oh, they're both critical of their own parties. And then a lot of them actually talked about how they thought that they were pro-peace and anti-war, and that there was one woman who was even telling us how like similar she thought AOC and Trump was, which is, hard for me to wrap my head around. But that was the feedback we got from these AOC Trump voters in her district.
Well, one
This
thing
is
I
in
think you all
Queens
are
where she
forgetting,
outperformed
though,
Kamala, right?
Yes, dramatically. Yeah.
one thing I think you all are forgetting, though, is that she danced that one time, and it's on video. So, sorry, guys. I think that's the end of her career. I mean, it's that, it's funny. I got thinking about that. Like, even just on a stupid, superficial level, Trump's stupid dance that went viral and was imitated by like right-wing figures and whatever. I almost wonder if like AOC could even weaponize that and like just like, totally like pull like an Aikido move and redirect the momentum about that. She just has so much natural talent and an ability to engage with people, I think, in an authentic way. So I'm excited to see where she goes. And plus, if you actually see her in congressional hearings, she's ferocious. Like you can
great.
She is.
hear
Sharp. Yeah.
you can hear the sphincters of the people she's about to question just clench shut in terror as soon as they sit down. It's like, oh fuck, And I mean, I just love it.
Just what I'm done with is like this useless consultant class that needs to like airbrush everything. They need to, workshop every answer like they did for Kamala, where you really feel like when you're asking or when Kamala's answering a question that she's going through all of the canned answers that this useless consultant class that gets paid millions and millions of dollars gave to her. I think they're useless. I would much rather trust like AOC on Instagram Live. I mean, we have that confidence that she can do those kinds of appearances and won't completely fuck it up. Whereas, do you have any confidence that Kamala Harris or Jerry Connolly or Joe Biden or any of the octogenarians, if we threw them onto Joe Rogan or we threw them onto Theo Vaughn, that they could perform? No, I think the moment is calling for less consultants and more authentic people that can look at the camera and actually say.
I'm excited
two
to see
sentences.
Pelosi on Flagrant. I don't know what you're talking about. Go back and forth.
I
mean,
actually would watch
unironically-
that.
Unironically, though, I think that's a good litmus test. Like, if your candidate isn't prepared to sit down for like a 3-hour long form interview, then maybe they're not the move. But
Not in this
when
not in this era. Yeah,
Right.
not in this era.
too much has changed. The landscape has just changed way too much, and I feel like that was like on full display in 2024 in a way that was not on display in any of the other years. It was just so important. But like, to the point of AOC, I can envision her stepping into a role like that. But I think like a lot would have to change between now and then, because if we look at Donald Trump's numbers, they're not particularly great. But on immigration, I think he's still slightly above water. So if you have an electorate that's looking at Donald Trump's current policies right now, which I'm sure all of us agree are nightmarish, like dystopian in our minds, but when a slight percentage of the country views that favorably, like what needs to happen in the next like 4 years? Because there has to be some movement that starts like right now. Like there need to be
Yeah.
hearts and minds that are changed like right now.
I don't actually think that's correct about immigration. I'm sure it depends on the poll, but the average of polls that I saw has them even underwater on immigration at this point. And of course, it's highly dependent on what you're asking about, right? So if you ask specifically about the border policy, yes, that is one area where he's still above water. If you ask about Gilmar Abrego Garcia, you will
Right,
get some
yeah.
of the lowest numbers you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put in that caveat that, first of all, I think he is somewhat underwater, at least according to the polling that I was seeing recently on immigration. But then also it really dramatically matters about what you are asking people about with regard to his immigration policy.
Mhm.
In terms of what needs to happen, I mean, I think you are in some ways already seeing it. You know, one thing that I think Democrats have lacked, and Kamala in particular, is Trump has his story of the world. I think it's an evil and untruthful story about how immigrants and, you know, trans people in the cultural elite are screwing you over, and that's why your life is a struggle, and that's why things are hard for you, or your community isn't what it used to be, or whatever your particular fears and concerns are. And I think the Democratic Party has failed to offer their own compelling version of that story. And I think Bernie and AOC have their version of that. And I think you've seen a grassroots organic response from from Democratic base voters at this point, but more broadly as well. I mean, you see Bernie's response and the way he was received on the Flagrant podcast, et cetera. But they have a story that is coherent to people, that addresses a lot of those insecurities, that has the benefit of being much more accurate and much more beneficial in terms of, you know, not demonizing people and locking them up in a foreign gulag for life with no due process. And I think that's a critical part of what it's going to take. And, you've got a lot of energy, grassroots energy. You have people who are looking for someone who's going to fight. I don't think you're going to have a problem rallying around a candidate next time. And look, hopefully we get there. I mean, I'm concerned about like what we're going to go through between now and then, and that we're going to even have elections that are free and fair. But hopefully the candidate will not be Donald Trump again. And I will say that I also feel somewhat hopeful because I don't think anyone else has the unique type of horrible but incredible charisma that Donald Trump does, and this hold on the electorate. I don't think a JD Vance pulls that off. I don't think a Don Jr. pulls that off, or whoever is the next anointed one.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I do want to piggyback off that for just a second, because I understand. I'm with you. The polling that I've seen shows that on the issue of immigration, separated from border security, like this notion of closing the border, it is still very popular. People do want a quote unquote closed border, and maybe that's specifically what Hutch is talking about. So let me hone in on that.
Yeah.
Somebody who is an outspoken progressive, what do you say that basically to Hutch's point, that a candidate is basically, if a candidate is asked, do you believe in a secure border? We all agree that the answer is going to have to be an unambiguous yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, of course. What would you like to see after that part? Like, AOC would have to answer a question. Yes, of course. We do have to have a secure border. We can't just let everybody in.
So
Right.
I before to interrupt, sorry. Bernie did say that. Bernie was someone who was not like open borders because he viewed that as a kind of a tool of the capitalists to lower wages. And
I think the whole open borders thing that's just a bad faith straw man the Republicans imposed on all of the Democratic candidates. There's not a single fucking Democrat that supports open borders, but the candidate is going to have to, in very plain language, make it abundantly clear that they don't believe in open borders. So I guess to focus more on what on Hutch said, Crystal, what would you expect or like, just off the cuff, for somebody like AOC to do with that one area where Donald Trump has persistent popularity? Yes, I believe in secure borders, but like, what would you like to see from her, hear from her in a situation like that?
I mean, I think if you go back to the messaging that Democrats only, abandoned, basically, that you have secure borders, you have a pathway to citizenship. And then I think you have to couple that with, I think it actually couples nicely at this point with real commitment to human rights and the rule of law, which is something that people have been deeply concerned with this Trump administration. On a practical level, one of the, and I'll let Pisco speak to this more than I can, but on a practical level, one of the things that you desperately need to do is surge the number of immigration judges, which if this administration was actually serious about adjudicating these, like, oh, we can't have 2 million trials. I mean, first of all, these are extremely perfunctory hearings. Like, they don't take a lot of time. And if you were serious about your plans here, you could increase the number of immigration judges. Instead, you've gone in the total opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so, so that's kind of a little bit in the weeds. But I also think you have to keep in mind that America has never been more favorable towards immigrants than they were during Trump's first term. Because it's one thing to think in the abstract, like, yeah, there's probably some people here that, are committing crimes or taking jobs or whatever, and we should get them out of here. When you actually see the reality of the mom and the, of course, with this administration, like the U.S. citizen children with cancer who are being deported and what this actually looks like, people turn against it really quickly. So one of the things that has frustrated me is there's been this assumption that opinion on immigration is completely, static and unchangeable, and there's no way you can persuade people or move them. And I think Democrats really sort of, got scared and like completely capitulated to a right-wing narrative on immigration. I think that was a big mistake. And, you can already see the way that polling has shifted dramatically, even in these first few months of the Trump administration. One other thing on this, and I like to get you guys' thoughts on this as well. One of the there's obviously like anti-immigrant sentiment in America. Is nothing new. One of the innovations of Trump's campaign this time around was to focus on immigration, not so much as an economic issue, although they talked about that as well. But they painted this picture of every immigrant being a criminal. He'd go on these long rants about, oh, they're opening up the asylums and letting in, prisoners and people with just making stuff up. But that was the central focus, or like, the lies, smears about Haitian immigrants, or the, blowing up of this Trenda Aragua situation, whatever was going on in Aurora, Colorado. The effort was to paint every immigrant as a criminal. That was a brazen lie, of course. And we know, both undocumented immigrants and legal immigrants more law abiding than U.S. citizens overall. And now what you see in this horrific cruelty and the, flouting of the law and unconstitutional behavior from the Trump administration is in some ways an attempt to cover for that lie. Because if you actually have a chance to look into the backgrounds of the men who have been sent for life to this foreign gulag in El Salvador, you find out, oh, the overwhelming majority of them aren't criminals. Very few of them had significant offenses. Some of them had, traffic tickets. Many of them had no criminal record at all. And then further, now they're starting to dig. Cato Institute did a study of the 90 that they were able to evaluate their status. They found, oh, they actually came here legally and were following all of the process that they were supposed to follow. So, I think a lot of what they've tried to do and desperately tried to avoid any courts being able to look into this is to cover for that original lie that there is this millions of immigrant criminals who are a threat to you and a threat to your safety. And so they just want to get them out of here before anyone can ask any questions about that.
Yeah, shout out to David Byer from the Cato Institute, who does really good work, and he's like the Democrats' go-to, immigration witness, and he just kicks ass. And he's a right-wing libertarian, but he's just so honest in terms of the data surrounding undocumented immigration.
I'll have to look him up. I actually wasn't familiar with him.
Oh yeah, he's the one who did the most recent study from the Cato Institute. You should check him out, BIER, and he's been in Congress or testifying in front of Congress multiple times. He's a powerhouse. You should check him out.
Yeah, it's also, I was just going to say, it's also important, I think, I feel like a lot of the times Democrats kind of get caught up, similar to what Pisco said, in this kind of like consultant debate about, what's the optimal messaging on every individual policy issue. But the problem with that is that if you put like optimal messaging, quote unquote, on every individual policy issue and then throw all of that on the same platform, you end up alienating parts of your base, because optimal messaging for the population at large is not the same thing as building a winning coalition of people who can actually, based on their different weighted issue prioritization, come together and vote for the same candidate. Immigration, even for people who say they approve of Donald Trump's handling of immigration, the people who say they approve are not also the people who that's their number one issue, right? They might just say,
Mhm.
oh, I approve of this, but maybe I'm a Democrat who votes Democrat because of welfare state issues, because of health care, whatever it might be. And that's something that Democrats seems like they've kind of failed to understand, right? Like moderates will criticize progressives for saying, you put all these progressive positions in one basket and all of a sudden it's a 30% approval rating for the platform. But moderates do the exact same thing with moderate messaging and assume they'll get a different outcome because it happens to be moderate and not progressive. And that's a mistake on both ends.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point. And I'm just so sick of like the consultant speak to your point. Like, think of all the incredibly extreme things that Donald Trump said during the campaign, positions he took during the campaign, things that I mean, it's utterly insane what he's done in office, you know. And I was someone who was really alarmed about the prospect of him coming back in because I expected a lot of extremism. I didn't expect 145% tariffs on China or like the whole insane tariff situation. I didn't expect that. I knew the Alien Enemies Act invocation was coming. I did not think that they would just, you know, ship whoever they wanted with zero due process into CCOT for life. That was the part I did not see coming. You know, I thought, okay, deportation's all right. Not that I was okay with it, but that's what I expected. And, you know, Elon Musk with Doge, I knew that Elon would be involved. I was very concerned because here you have the richest man on the planet and all of these conflicts of interest, blah, blah, blah. I didn't think he would just come in and like, oh, we're just not going to have USAID anymore. Oh, we're just not going to have the CFPB, the Anti-Scam Bureau. Oh, we're just not going to have the Department of Education anymore. And so when you think of like the insane, extreme things that he does all the time, including today with the, you know, president of South Africa and whatever. And then Democrats are running around like terrified to do a podcast or say what they really think on, you know, immigration. It seems ridiculous to me at this point to be so afraid of your shadow when, you know, they're loud and proud about some of the craziest shit you could possibly imagine, including they pardoned all of the violent Jan 6ers who beat up police officers. And we're like, gee, how can we poll test on this or that issue? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, they're about to give $5 million to Ashley Babbitt's family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely, what a wild thing, you know? Imagine if Kamala Harris had said, yeah, the government's going to be giving millions of dollars to the exact BLM protesters who like set fires to cop cars and something. And,
Right.
you know, imagine
We're
how
gonna have a
right-wingers-
national holiday after Chaz. You know,
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
Right.
it's just insane. I mean, you know, Kamala gets crap to this day. You hear it from right wingers to this day about how she retweeted a bail fund for BLM protesters who had been arrested, right? And it's like retweeting a bail fund for BLM protesters versus giving millions of dollars of taxpayer money to a lady who was actively trying to overthrow democracy, who was killed in the process of doing that.
And it was an indigent bail fund. It was like a fucking generic, like it wasn't like it was specially created
Yeah,
for
exactly.
protesters during the like the whole,
you know, Democrats just to Crystal's point, I think that's exactly right. You know, Democrats, I feel like for a long time, the general strategy has been like, stay out of the media, right? Don't make a scene, right? Allow the Republicans to kind of soak up this space. And because of the, you know, they're kind of like polarizing our own movement, galvanizing it for us. And it's like, that is true to some extent, but you have to do some positive, proactive work on the other end. And it can't be understated, Crystal's point as well about, you know, why is it that the day before Republicans didn't believe that, you know, Haitians were eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. And then the day after Trump said it, half of them immediately believed that story. Well, it's because leadership has a large effect on what the base actually believes and what, you know, as much as Democrats feel like, you know, these kind of like optimal narrative strategies should hopefully affect their political influence. At the end of the day, the base has to be galvanized as well by its leadership, right? You have to have leadership telling the base what is true and what is not true. Otherwise, you're just left with one side doing the same thing.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
We are a very ideologically diverse, like Big Tent party. And so we talk about like the tension between moderates and the progressives. And I'm thinking about the conversation we were just having about AOC with respect to immigration. It sounded like everybody on the panel agreed that we should have a platform that's just like common sense, border security, pathway to citizenship, humane, sort of these sorts of things, these sorts of ideas. Well, when we say border security in the abstract, like what does that mean? When someone asks AOC, like, well, what do you plan to do about border security? Usually that manifests with extra funding, hiring CBP officers, you know, hiring like, you know, expanding ICE, maybe, I don't know, hiring more immigration judges. And if she says that, she will very greatly anger her base. So I'm just curious to see like how that's going to play out. Like, how is she going to navigate that question?
I'd be
And I
interested
do want to correct. I do
see-
want to correct myself because you guys are right that I looked at the number and I think WAPO had him at like 48% approval on immigration, so a little bit under.
I think he's a tiny bit under.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, does anybody know the polling on ICE? Because like I know people have been calling for the abolition of ICE for some time. I think at this point, like I don't see a good faith defense. I mean, obviously you may, I don't know if Border Patrol, like I don't know how much of like redundant responsibilities there are among other agencies. Obviously you would have to have, you know, a robust border enforcement agency. But like the shit we're seeing from ICE now,
I mean,
especially
ICE
under
was
Tom
created.
Homan,
ICE was created by the Bush administration. This is an organization that hasn't been around for 100 years or anything like that. I mean, it's not as if it's this crazy institution similar to the Department of Homeland Security, right? I mean, I think that what's troubling to me about ICE and why I think that abolish ICE language, I mean, on one hand, like you guys are kind of referencing, it could be popular at this point because ICE seems to be enacting so much crazy stuff, is that look, as a government employee, whether you're a cop for the federal government or you're just a Social Security Administration worker, you have a duty to follow the law, right? You cannot follow illegal orders, even if it's from the president. The difficulty of being a federal employee and swearing an oath is that you might be in the awkward position of having to tell your boss, who might ultimately be the president, I'm not going to do this, right? And when I see video after video of groups of ICE officers and Homeland Security people just fucking black bagging people, all those people need to be fired by the incoming administration, who's a Democratic administration, ideally,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
These are people who they're saying, I simply don't give a shit about the law, right? And whether that means abolishing ICE or pulling a Doge and firing half of the ICE officers who are acquiescing to this ridiculous illegal immigration regime, something clearly radical needs to be done.
Well, you're
Agreed.
talking about reforming ICE or ICE, yeah, which I'm sure
either one.
everybody would agree with. But even when we go back to like the number back in 2018 was only a quarter of Democrats. This is during like the peak anti-Trump kind of pro-immigration wave, that pendulum swing. It was only a quarter of Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. That's not to say that they had a favorable opinion of ICE. It says 57% of Democrats viewed the agency negatively for obvious reasons. There was like family separation at the time. It was horrible. But when AOC is asked this question, she's going to have to give like a substantive answer for what that actually looks like. And
Look, I hear your concerns on the political point. I don't know if it's popular. I don't know if it will be popular by the time we get to the end of like the horrors of this administration. I can just tell you that I think they've been vindicated and I think they're correct. I think it's a rogue agency. And this gets back to like the asymmetry between the Republicans and the Democrats. How many like Republicans just came in and slashed a bunch of agencies. And, you know, and we're like watching this one that is completely rogue and everybody's terrified to say, hey, you know, maybe we should do something about that. But they'll just come in, hey, you know, kids in Africa who are going to die now because we just slashed USAID and they don't give a shit and they just keep moving. It's just wildly different over there in what the risks that they're willing to take, I guess, and the insane actions they're willing to do.
I think also the permission structure within and outside the party is one of my like recurring theses on my channel, is just bitching about the double standard between the right and the left and their political proxies and the Republican and Democratic Party. And I think, you know, people like all of us have to one extent or another played a role in it. I think there's just a greater expectation for consistency and transparency among the Democratic Party, which is probably one of the reasons why people are so upset about, you know, this alleged cover-up about President Biden's mental fitness. I don't think there was a cover-up in the sense like everybody knew he was an old man with
the
somewhat
insiders
diminished
covered it up.
faculties.
Wait, so I want to be clear about something real quick.
Sure.
I agree with you on the broad strokes that people are overstating some of it.
Yeah.
But there are people who absolutely did cover it up. If by cover up you mean did not disclose or hid, or, you know, someone was preventing Biden from going to certain places. Someone was giving him cue cards for 10-minute gaggles, 20-minute gaggles. And
they were absolutely doing crisis management to keep him as insulated as possible. But when people are referring to like a media cover-up, that's bullshit. It's just not true. You know, even like CNN, like it was a topic on CNN all the time. Jake Tapper asked President Biden about this and Biden officials about this. Biden's age was probably the most singularly discussed political topic during the 2024 campaign, at least, as much as, I mean, shit, Trump was nearly assassinated. And
Josiah,
Biden's age got more
Wait,
coverage. Yeah.
agreed. But did you know during the entirety of Biden's administration that they were actively seeking not to schedule things after 6 o'clock? Did you know that?
No, I figured, like, I heard, I want to
Would
say
that disturb you if you did know it?
Sure, but that's not my point. I don't contest. I'm not even sure why you're picking this fight. I don't contest that.
I love picking fights with you.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I understand. Crystal, you have to understand that Pisco is a big Supreme Court simp. He's a big Merrick Garland guy, so we fight a lot. But yeah, so there's no question that Biden's aides tried to do crisis management and make him appear more robust and less vulnerable but everybody knew that Biden was old and diminished to some extent, and it was discussed everywhere. I don't even know. You got me off topic. Why the fuck was I even mentioning that?
I just want to say you're using some. I notice you're using these euphemisms for these insiders who I think deserve our contempt. You're using euphemisms, crisis management, this or that. Like they were.
It was a crisis. They were because a cover up would not be the biggest fucking story of the 2024 election, which ultimately led to Biden getting kicked out. It's not a cover up. I'm right and you're wrong on this. I'm sorry. If you use the word
gotta be
fucking
trolling.
cover up.
But Josiah, okay, the media did buy their whole these videos are just cheap fakes, and this is a Republican op.
Some of them, okay.
Senate trying
A
to
lot
show
of them
Biden
were.
that.
Some of them
They
were
did-
cheap fakes.
They
But some
did,
of them,
okay, they did buy this he's
I
not in decline. He
totally-
just has a stutter,
You bought it,
guys.
Josiah.
I
Which is
totally,
How dare
totally
you? You're
disagree.
being
I
ableist.
totally,
We
calling
didn't
you
buy
out.
that.
I totally
Josiah,
disagree.
you bought it.
So
Wait,
some of
Josiah,
them,
you bought it. Wait, no, I'm calling you out right now. Josiah, I'm
Yes
calling
or
you
no,
out right now.
Josiah?
How many times did you come and say Donald Trump is way more cognitively impaired than Joe Biden? You don't believe that anymore, do you?
I believe, in terms of diminishment, no. The reason I would say that he was cognitively impaired and more so than Biden is because I think he's dumber than Biden. I think he's also in a state of age-related cognitive decline, and I also think he's a malignant narcissist. I think he has more mental defect in aggregate, lower IQ.
I'll say Donald
lower
Trump is
base-
more brain broken than Biden. Have you heard him speak in
Right,
any
right.
Did you watch that press conference today with the South African
but it's-
president?
Like, let
That
me
shit
ask you,
was
like,
crazy.
wait, let me ask you a
Did he
question.
say that he finally beat Medicare?
Beat it.
He didn't
beat it
do
to
that.
death.
Okay,
He
hold
beat
on.
it to
Okay,
death.
Josiah and Hutch,
I'm
you
gonna
guys
give you that.
are Josiah and Hutch, you guys are living out a little too hard here. Okay, it is obviously the case that
Okay.
Trump's brain is melting true, but Biden clearly showed much more robust signs of aging than Donald Trump.
Yes,
did.
Let me
I
say-
will
let me
absolutely
say-
agree.
I mean, that's true. I'm
Let
not.
me
I
say
will
one
agree
other
to that.
thing
Yeah.
about cover up. I mean, in terms of the media, I think there was a lot of willful blindness where they just trusted the Biden people. And so when they were like, this is the best Biden ever, they were like, oh, all right.
yeah, that's
Even
obviously
as if you
horseshit.
look at the overall polling, the public was quite clear that there was something going on here. I also have to say now that we, given what we know about the insider cover up of his aides, who were, scheduling fake town halls because they knew he couldn't handle real ones and going through all these elaborate lengths to protect him from any sort of scrutiny. I mean, I don't put it past them that they hid a cancer diagnosis
Me
from
neither.
the public. And that would be an extraordinary, really, truly criminal cover up, especially given, again, it's not like the stakes were low. We're talking about Donald Trump here back in the White House. And look, maybe if there was a primary and they went through the process, maybe the Democrats still would have lost. But guess what? We're never going to know. And they would have certainly had a much better chance if someone had been able to be tested and have, a base come around them and, be able to workshop their messaging and have a normal campaign. And we'd have a much better shot than they did.
Yeah, but to be fair, by all accounts, we had a much better shot because Kamala took over. But to Crystal's point, it's like, well, how much Kamala was clearly herself not an optimal candidate, probably for the moment either, right? And so, who would have risen to the top in a truly open primary? I mean, maybe it would have been somebody we didn't. Maybe it would have been like Newsom, a guy who maybe on this podcast we don't necessarily like, but maybe he would have had a better chance of winning if he was, the
Steve
Democratic.
Bannon,
let
Charlie
me
Kirk could be
say-
his fucking running mate at this
Yeah,
point. It seems
exactly.
like, God
Let me-
damn.
but let me
Oh,
say, even if you went through a primary process, I think there was a decent chance you end up with Kamala as the candidate because she's the vice president and she has high name recognition, all of that.
Yeah.
But a Kamala Harris who had to go through that process would have herself been a better candidate because you guys know debating and making your case, all of these things are just like anything else. It takes reps, it takes practice. And so if she had to go through that process, first of all, people may have made another choice after they, evaluated her again. But even if it was her, she would have been a stronger candidate going in and without any of this cloud of like she's just anointed and they did the switcheroo and all
More
that sort of
time.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
she would
She would've
have
had more
been able
time.
to hire her own staff and develop her own platform. I mean, there's just so many sort of suboptimal things about Kamala taking over in the way that she did, that of course, even if she won an open primary, that she would have been better off as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Democrats, unfortunately, it just seems like with the three, Democratic reps in the last 5 months dying of health related issues, it just fucking really doesn't seem like they're learning this lesson, unfortunately. So we'll see what 2028 looks like. We might be in for another 78-year-old. I'm not sure who on the bench is old enough, but
The
I think
fact
they're
is
gonna-
that
Crystal, real
go
quick,
ahead,
I'm sorry.
Crystal.
I was just to say, who is your least favorite Biden cabinet official? I'm curious.
Oh, my least favorite Biden cabinet official. That's a good question.
Is there one that just jumps out? Like
Blinken. She's gonna say Blinken.
I'm gonna guess Sullivan.
Fuck. You're
It's
right. It might be Blinken. Fuck.
definitely
well done, Pisco. I was setting
between
you
the
up for
two
Merrick
of them.
Garland.
Yeah. Between the two of them. I mean, I think, and that's the other thing is like, that is the other part of his legacy. And it's become undeniable at this point. Like, you have Piers Morgan today, like, you know what, Mehdi Hassan, turns out you were right. It is a genocide. I mean, it's just like, I struggle because to your point, Josiah, from earlier, there were genuinely things that he did economically that were really good. They were really steps in the right direction. He did some protective tariff, like protectionist policies, but it was paired with industrial policy. It was actually working. Like this was the first recovery from a recession, the post-COVID recovery in my lifetime. I'm, I think, older than all of you guys, but where manufacturing jobs were actually increasing.
Mhm.
And, you had investments in these critical industries. You have this great, antitrust direction, which is really important in terms of checking the wild abuses of corporate power. You had a commitment to labor that we haven't seen in years and years. That was, the best of my lifetime, the best of any president for a very long time. But you can't, it's hard to even talk about that in the shadow of, a genocide that I feel is the most like morally pressing issue that, as an American taxpayer that we face right now.
yeah, it's like Nixon founding the EPA. It doesn't really get brought up when you talk about Nixon, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Can we talk about that situation right now as it stands?
Nixon
for a
founding the
moment?
EPA.
Because- Well, no.
That's
Oh.
actually why we brought Crystal here.
I
Like,
have
somebody
some
to
thoughts.
somebody to defend Richard Nixon. Somebody's got to do it. I think his reputation's making a comeback. The second most corrupt.
Look, I take him
Republican
over Trump.
president.
I'll tell you that.
Fuck
rid of the
yes,
gold
please.
standard. You know?
Hunter, I would too. I mean, at this point, I don't even know what Watergate was, why it was wrong. I mean, if you send federal
He'd get
agents to do
immunity
a
for it.
executive things, yeah. So I want to paint on a picture, and I want your thoughts because I know you're very steeped in these issues, Crystal.
Yeah.
So I think that there is somewhat of a genuine potential rift between Netanyahu and Trump. It seems like at least some elements of the Trump administration do want to deal with Iran and do want some level of normalization with the Gulf states and further economic ties with them, if anything, just for Trump's personal business dealings. So, what is the prospect in your mind that Trump could actually exert and actually will exert some pressure on Netanyahu to stop the slaughter in Gaza? He seems to be right now one of few people outside of Israel that would be able to have some influence in what's
Yeah.
happening. Do you think that that is particularly likely?
No. I mean, I'll believe any of this when I see it. We're getting the same, like, Trump's really frustrated at Bibi headlines that we got during the Biden administration. Bibi gave a speech today saying that their new requirement for ending the war is implementation of the Trump plan for complete ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Trump has gone out of his way to say there's no daylight between him and Bibi. And it also, the Iran negotiations, I'm not as hopeful about as I was maybe a week or so ago, because you have an increasingly hardline position being taken by the Trump administration about enrichment. So, I hope I'm wrong, but
Crystal, can I also add to that? I'm curious. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. Did I not see a headline somewhere? I could be making this up, but I don't think I am. That the Trump administration is drafting plans to move Palestinians to
Libya?
a different
Libya.
country? Libya. That's what it was. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they denied that, but
Oh,
you
okay.
know,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
but Trump has repeatedly said this is what he wants. He wants it to be a quote unquote freedom zone for the world's people, but with no Palestinians. And you know, I think he sees it as this like real estate deal, and I think he's committed to it. Now, whether or not he can actually accomplish that is another matter. But no, I mean, listen, anytime that an American president wants to stop funding the genocide and stop sending the bombs, they can do it. Biden could have done it. Trump could do it now, and it would be over. You know, we even like this little limited bit of face-saving aid that's being sent in. They explicitly said we're sending in this aid so that we can continue
Get off our back.
the
Yeah, so
annihilation
international-
and the world
yeah.
will get off our back. I mean, my only, I don't know. My only hope is that it does seem like there has been a bit of a dam breaking in terms of European countries. I don't know if you guys saw today that in the West Bank, the IDF fired on a bunch of like EU diplomats and diplomats from all around the world. And there is an increasing sense of like, okay, this is out of control. And so maybe there will be some pressure that'll be applied there. But am I hopeful that Trump is going to be that person? No, I'm not hopeful.
Did you see the public sentiment polls and domestically? So something crazy, like the shift has been insane between like 2021 and 2025, where people are at now. And some of the biggest shifts have been among older Democrats.
Yes.
Which to me was a little surprising. Do you have any thoughts on the demographic breakdown there? But just across all age groups, it seems like sentiment against Israel has shifted dramatically.
The only group that still has a positive view of Israel are old Republicans. That's the only group. Even young Republicans have majority disapproval of Israel at this point. And so you have a situation which won't be sustainable for the long term, where the elected officials, both in the Republican Party, but especially in the Democratic Party, are wildly at odds with their base, wildly at odds. And I do think that will be another litmus test issue in the 2028 primary. I don't think that, you know, I think this will be very important and central of, you know, where were you on this? What did you say? What did you do, et cetera?
To your point, Pisco, there is actual personal animus between Trump and Bibi. Like Trump holds a grudge against Bibi because I think Bibi was like the first foreign leader to acknowledge Biden as the winner in the 2020 election.
That's
Really?
right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
so-
before they technically called it, and Trump
Wow.
very much holds that against him. Yeah.
But
I didn't know
he's to Crystal's point. I don't think he's shown any indication that he's not going to fully support them in whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Trump probably just, you know, I feel like in a lot of ways, Trump really does think in a business sense when it comes to Israel, right? Like, oh, they're buying a lot of our weapons, right? That's good for our country, right? Oh, you know, look at the development opportunities in Gaza. It's like when you fucking destroy every piece of human infrastructure, somebody has to build it, I guess, right? And so rebuild it, I should say, right? And so,
well, I mean, even him
yeah.
like rescinding, which I don't think this has been formally done yet because I think there's like some internal resistance. But like, you know, when he announced he was going to end the sanctions on Syria, the day before, it was reported that the new president, you know, talked to Trump about, you know, Trump Tower Damascus, right? So like, you know, removing the sanctions, good thing, but the only time Trump ever even contemplates doing something good in outcome is because of corruption. Well,
I mean, it's clear.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Qatar. Like, it's obvious that many world leaders, including the Qataris, have decided that the best strategy to deal with Trump over the next 4 years is just to bribe him. You know, just like do shit for him, and you know he'll scratch your back after you scratch his, and you know that's a very unfortunate thing. And so you know, that's my thought is like I don't think that this. I recall Jeb Tan on Twitter, who we all know, but probably Crystal doesn't.
Yeah.
He said something similar about Ukraine. He said, "Oh well." I think Trump is actually going to be crazily good for Ukrainian people because Vladimir Putin is going to disrespect Trump. And then Trump is all of a sudden going to be, you know, make Ukraine great again, fucking going to Ukraine, funding Ukraine, hundreds of billions of dollars, right? And it's like, no, like, I don't think that's true at all. Like, I think that that's kind of a misreading of Trump's dynamic, you know? And I think that similarly with Israel, I think even if he does have a personal, like kind of personal problems with Netanyahu, it's not clear to me that he's going to act on that insofar as it benefits the Palestinian people, which is obviously the only thing that the left should care about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm very skeptical that there's going to be a movement away from Israel, because if you think about even inside of Trump's own cabinet, even the people who are a little more like, hey, let's negotiate with Iran, let's do things a little bit differently than Republican neocons have done before. Those people are all still extremely like anything for Israel, like Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Waltz. Well, that guy's gone, but he was a neocon across the board. Pete Hegseth, JD Vance, they're all lockstep on the issue. So even if you think about the personnel that he's put in place, and that's not to talk about psychos like Mike Huckabee, who are just.
Yeah. And hopefully, look, I hope that this is a litmus test in the primary, if only for the reason that, again, it's a great issue where I could see a lot of Democrats coming out. Hey, Gavin, how do you feel about Israel and Palestine? Oh, well, Israel has the right to defend itself. And I think that the relationship between it, and, it's just very centrist, very milquetoast, tilt Israel position. But it's like, look, the base is just, that's clearly not even where the base of the Democratic Party is. Like, you have to win primaries first. Republicans have realized this because their base has been so angry for so long. And so hopefully in this environment where the Democratic base is angrier, hopefully it encourages Democrats to be a little bit more bold on this issue. Look, a year ago, Jon Ossoff, he's got probably the toughest reelection of any Democrat in 2026. About a year ago, he came out and said, look, we should obviously at the very least condition arms sales to Israel until they radically change their policy. That was Jon Ossoff in probably the most vulnerable seat in the country. That was far before we saw these transitions in the base. And so every Democrat should have the courage to do that if Jon Ossoff can. And he's not exactly a radical progressive, right?
Yeah.
His race got a lot easier now that Kemp said that he wasn't seeking.
That's
Oh,
huge.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I actually think Jon Ossoff is kind of a secret progressive, but he has to
Hiding his
he has to
power
do what he has to
level.
do to win in Georgia. But he does all of this I think he goes and works with inmates in prisons. Like there's a soul there. There's a soul there for sure. And you see this with Van Hollen as well, who I remember traveled to Jordan and was evaluating the lack of aid that was going on and saying, listen, this is squarely on the Israeli government. The aid isn't going in because they don't want it to go in at a time when, that was difficult for any elected official to say. And we see his courage too with regard to going down to El Salvador. So, I've appreciated that.
There's a really great
before
clip
we
of
continue, I'm
him.
sorry, real quick. Do you, Crystal, do you have more time?
Yeah, I'm
What
good.
you got? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Everybody else
Yeah.
good? We good?
So I have to get on a flight, so I have to leave in like 5 minutes. But
Good.
you
The
guys should
conversation
continue
gets a
on.
lot
Great.
better. Fuck
No,
you.
Reducing it
My
up.
only thing is that I think the Knicks are playing. So at some point, go watch that.
Fair
But that's
enough.
gonna be going on for a while.
Yeah.
Well, Pisco, I'll let you and Crystal then before you have to dip, Pisco, and then we'll continue.
Well, I want to do something unheard of on this show, which is to praise Cenk Uygur. We spent a lot of time criticizing him and making fun of him a little bit, but when he's on your side, I think.
So anyway, enough out of Pisco.
Too far, sir. Too far.
So on one issue, I think he was right on was obviously Biden's age, but the second is on his case for ending the slaughter in Gaza as a way of being pro-Israel, right? So it's not pro-Israel, right, to make yourself a pariah state. It's not pro-Israel. The approval rating that Crystal and I pointed to before of Israel is cratering right now. And so how can it be in Israel's best interest for what's going on in Gaza to continue? And so I really think that we need to have, if we're going to have this kind of commitment to Israel continuing as Israel's friend, and that's how we have to frame things. I think that, you can sell as well as obviously you should make appeals for the children. One was it Rachel? Who's the
Miss
mom?
Rachel.
Miss Rachel.
Miss Rachel. Yeah, I almost cried when I saw.
Oh, I did
her.
cry.
She did like a little something with a child from Gaza.
3-year-old double amputee whose brothers and dad are still in Gaza starving.
Yeah, it's a tearjerker, and she made a statement and said something to the effect of, I'm doing this for the children of Gaza. I mean, I'm someone who supports children, right? So, I think that those appeals can be made on the for the benefit of the Gazans and the Palestinians, obviously, but also for the benefit of Israel. This can't help Israel in the long term, and so I want to praise Cenk on that. That's one of the reasons why I'm so sad that on the domestic issues that I feel that Cenk has started to be a little bit more pro MAGA or at least more sympathetic.
Pisco's phoning it in front of Crystal. He's been
I know,
radically
I know.
critical of Cenk on
Yeah,
this show. Okay.
No, but she knows.
Yeah, I'm gonna call you out, Pisco. Fuck you, Pisco. Pisco,
but-
you've been
but
in Jenk's mentions every goddamn
all
night.
of that,
Yeah.
all of that is just to say, I know that different senators they have different constituencies, but there are different ways to sell this policy.
That's a good
that I think
point.
can appeal. Yeah,
Listen, listen, it's not my particular interest to be like, Israel's
Yeah.
friend at this point, but your
Mm.
point is correct. Sometimes if you are going to be a true friend to someone, you're going to tell them when they're fucking up, and I think Israel is in grave peril because of this dramatic shift. I mean, when the dramatic political shift in the US is going to have significant consequences for them because they do rely on, significant aid from us, diplomatic cover, and all the rest. And I don't think they're going to be able to take that for granted in the future.
Yeah, it's
On
one of
that
the
note, folks,
frustrating things about. Oh yeah, go on, Pisco. Sorry.
I have to leave you all, Crystal. It's so nice having you here. And the rest of Live and Learn boys, I have to go get ready for a flight. But
Listen,
really, really
bro, I
appreciate it.
love you.
And
I hope you have a
Yeah.
safe flight. All right, despite
Thank you
all
so
of
much.
the shit you give
Just-
me on a constant
And
basis.
despite your
I
differences.
know.
Yeah.
I know. Much love.
Good to see you, Pisco. Bye.
I
Yeah.
was just going to say, it's one of the frustrating things about Democratic administrations, because it's like, it's not clear to me that the aid that Israel gets is totally substitutable from other sources if the U.S. decided to play hardball with that aid. I mean, some people talk about Israel like, they're going to get a closer relationship with Russia or China or something like that. And it's like, yeah, but even if that was true, even if that was possible, like they don't want the Russian equipment. Like it's not like good, right? Like they want the good American shit, right? And we're the ones obviously bottlenecking that. And so, yeah, it's just I don't know. It's been very bizarre. And the more that's come out from the Biden administration on that issue, the more it seems like, there was a lot. It seems like there was a lot of State Department employees who were kind of like, this is fucked up. Like we got to really do something about this. But that just really didn't seem to trickle up to the leadership. I mean, there were some things where I think there was a moment where Biden like flew in aid or something and had that
Yeah.
land bridge that fell apart.
God. Yeah.
Some some Band-Aid stuff, but it's hard to say how much pressure was ever really exerted on the Netanyahu administration under Biden.
Well, there's a
Very-
couple. There's a
very little.
Go ahead.
Very little. I mean, I do think they put some pressure on them with regard to aid. I think more aid went in because of some Biden administration pressure than would have.
And that's clearly true. Now that Trump, like as soon as Trump takes office, aid goes to zero. It's like that's probably not a coincidence, right?
Right. That's exactly right. But outside of that, I think it was you had like the Israeli ambassador say outright, no, they never asked us to end the war. I mean, I think there was very limited. Remember, there was like one shipment of 2,000-pound bombs that was temporarily held. There were maybe like 5 violent settlers who had some sanctions put on them or something of that nature. But I think Biden, this again is like goes to the age conversation. I think his mentality was locked into his vision of, Israel when it was at its sort of like labor Zionist peak in the 1970s or whatever. And I think he was, unlike Trump, who I think is just transactional and, coalitional and like, okay, this is what Mary Madelson wants me to do or whatever. I think Biden was a committed Zionist. And, I think he also, in his 40, 50 years in Washington, politically, it was always the right answer to just do what Israel wanted you to do. That was the safe political choice. So, all of those reflexes and historic ideology and, his impressions of Israel from 1970, whatever, I think that all, played into
Because
what
didn't
we
he
ended
like
up with.
reference a lot like Golda Meir and like
Yes,
like
he
other
does.
like he was just like a constant reference point with him. I'm curious, Crystal, especially because Breaking Points has been so successful and you guys have been pretty relentlessly critical of the Trump administration. And it seems, by the way, which to whatever extent you're comfortable talking about this, that some of your right-wing co-hosts are also becoming very critical of the Trump administration, like Sagar and
Emily.
Emily, thank you.
Yep. Mhm.
Given Trump's attacks on the media, are you concerned that some of that shit might be heading your way or Kyle's way or our way or anything like that? Has that thought crossed your mind?
It's crossed my mind for sure. I mean, I think we're ultimately like sort of small fish. I think Trump has a fixation on, as much as he hates legacy media, I think he has a fixation on legacy media. And so I would say there were other moments when I felt a little more concerned about that. But, the people he's going after the most, by and large, are people who are really critical of, what we're doing in Israel. Obviously, that's what he's been using with the student crackdown and with student deportations, and they want to make anyone who is pro-Palestinian, like giving material support to terrorism, like that's been a key part of their authoritarian crackdown. And so, as someone who's been very vocal, of course, that has to cross your mind.
Crystal, I have a question. This is a left turn, though, okay, from the
Okay.
Israel-Palestine topic. The budget, okay, we're coming. It's a Friday deadline. This will be our last show until supposedly this budget's supposed to be passed. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think that the budget is going to be passed? Are we going to see significant changes? Are we going to see more cuts, less cuts? The moderate's going to win. Chip Roy's going to be out on an island by himself. What's your expectation coming into the Friday vote?
Assuming 4 more Democrats don't die between now and then.
Great point.
Not a
great
safe
point.
assumption. Fair enough. I guess they're going to probably get it together, just judging by the fact that, we've had a couple of these like, oh, I don't know if the Freedom Caucus is going to come along or whatever. And then ultimately they get it together and pass whatever monstrosity they're trying to pass. Now, I will say 2 things that are a little bit different now. One, Elon Musk is taken off the chessboard, apparently, and all of his, millions and millions of dollars and threatening primary challenges and any sense that he has political power, that's off. And that's significant. Like, that does actually really matter. And Trump is not as popular as he was early in the term. They're starting to think about the midterms. They're starting to think about, eventually some Republican world beyond Trump. But I still think he has so much just power in the Republican Party. He has went in and made his case directly and all of that I think they probably are going to figure out some way to get on board. And I think it's really important to, in broad terms, understand what this budget is, because I think it is a perfect representation of their values. It is a massive expansion of the police state. Huge defense budget, huge, increase in funds to ICE and for detention centers and all of that. So
Wait, they're
huge
increasing the military, but I was assured.
I
by some
know,
people
I
that
know
there'd
this
be a
is-
cut.
Yeah, shocking. In any case,
Doesn't it make ICE the most funded agency?
yes, I think in U.S. history, perhaps in world history. Yeah, in terms of like a law enforcement agency, that's correct. So, huge police state. Obviously huge tax cuts for the rich, and then everybody else gets the shaft. And so it's oligarchy plus police state. I mean, what could be a better picture of Trump 2.0 than what this budget reflects?
Well, there's
Kyle,
also
before
these.
you reply,
There's
Hutch, do you think it's gonna go through? What do you think about it?
I think she's probably right that they'll squeak it through in the end. But like, even though they have slimmer margins this time around, like they failed to pass repeal the ACA in 2017. I think this Congress would have probably repealed the ACA. To Crystal's point, like they've excised like all the sort of more moderate maverick type Republicans, like the Mitt Romneys and the Jeff Flakes, they're fucking gone. It's
Yeah,
just,
that's right.
and he has just so much authority and influence in the party right now. But these massive cuts to healthcare are politically toxic. And if we rewind the tape back to 2018, the Democrats won in a blue wave election, not because they were running on like Trump is bad and a fascist or whatever. They were running on, we're going to protect your healthcare. So this, I think, who's that? One of the Nate Silver's a big pollster, obviously. He was talking about how maybe Democrats can take back the Senate because of these cuts to healthcare. I don't know how true that is, but this will prove to be a very unpopular thing. He ran on no cuts to Medicare, no cuts to Medicaid, no cuts to Social Security, and they're cutting it by billions of dollars. And so conventional political wisdom would say that they're probably going to pay a price for that during the midterms.
I think you could check me on this, but I'm pretty sure during his term in office, his approval rating was at its lowest after they passed the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act giant tax giveaway to the rich. So, and I mean, they know that this is unpopular. That's why they're trying to do like, let's put in the no tax on tips thing to give a little bit of some kind of something that they can sell with this thing. But
Can I ask you about that, Crystal, on that point?
It's huge upward transfer of wealth is the bottom line.
What did you think about that? That it passed unanimously in the Senate, no tax on tips. Were you surprised, and what do you think about that?
I mean, I support the policy. Sure. It's peanuts, obviously, compared to what is being given away in the rest of the bill. But it's only through the Senate. We'll see if it makes it into the House bill. We'll see if it makes it into the final thing. I'm still a little bit skeptical that they actually get it in there, but maybe they do feel like they need, something that they can kind of hang their hat on. The other thing that I'll say about it is, like, I'm not a deficit hawk. I've mocked, all the like how you pay for it kind of rhetoric, but at this point we're getting to be in a very different place. In the markets today, huge, 800 point drop because there was a really weak treasury bond auction where there just were not a lot of buyers. And so the rate went up significantly. I mean, this is really, another one of those massive warning signs that the world is moving away from the US. And so if we lose that exorbitant privilege we have of being the world's reserve currency, and if, countries are looking away from buying our debt and looking at other potential safe havens, then yeah, our debt and deficit is going to become a real problem. And so the Congressional Budget Office says that this is about, as the deficit by about $4 trillion. That was another reason, I think, for the market sell-off that happened today, because they want to get their tax cuts, but they're also looking at the, fiscal situation with concern. So, that is, again, not the thing that I typically am like waving the red flag about, but I think we're in a different place, partly because of the actions of Trump himself, and have to be a bit more concerned about that.
Well,
I know,
Caroline,
Cowboy, you're writing a Substack about the no tax on tips thing tomorrow, so I'll be interested to.
Oh,
and we should send that to Chris.
It's already out, Josiah. It's already
It
out.
is?
Terrible
Oh.
policy. Terrible policy. I mean, it's in part it's terrible in its reduced down form. Not because, some people will say, and I put all these arguments in the article, like, oh, like what if a doctor starts getting paid in tips all of a sudden? Well, they have income limits and they have a standard deduction framework, right? So the regressivity isn't as big of a deal for this policy. I think the biggest problem with this policy is that it effectively taxes one kind of poor person more than another. And it just doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to say that, oh, if you make $25,000 a year in tips, which is the standard deduction for tips if this bill gets passed, you pay zero in taxes. But if you make $25,000 a year as like a McDonald's, cook or something like that, you pay $1,200, $1,300 in taxes. Like, that's a ridiculous policy. And it's one of those things that I think, to Crystal's point, I think that you're right about how this is ultimately just like a drop in the bucket to try and get people distracted on what the main issues are in this bill. Cuts to healthcare, massive tax cuts to the rich. Because at the end of the day, like, look, if you think that poor workers need help, you can do two things that make a lot more sense. You can just say that the standard deduction for everyone goes up, because then you're not only talking about workers, you're talking about people who don't work, like low income seniors and people like that who still have incomes, but they're still very poor despite the fact that they don't work. That would help everyone, not just tipped employees. And then also, you could also just establish a universal basic income and just directly give people money instead of having them pay less in taxes. That's a less efficient way to do things as well, because again, it's not just about people who are working and not working who are filing taxes. There's a whole bunch of people who don't work and don't file taxes that need a lot of help, that are very, very poor. And that's where a basic income would help. But the Republicans are playing pretend with this no tax on tips thing. Same thing with the Democrats. I mean, I can understand maybe the best argument for it is, well, politically speaking, it's just so hard to vote against something like that. Like, maybe that's true, but I think that if you vote against it with the rhetoric of like, look, this is a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem, right? Which is this huge giveaway to the rich. And look, I'm all for increasing the standard deduction or establishing a basic income, but no Democrats saying that. They're just playing right in. Oh no, this is just a genuinely good thing that Republicans are proposing, and that's ridiculous. There needs to be Democrats that are coming out and saying, look, this policy is bad at the very least because it is radically incomplete when it comes to solving and addressing the issues of poverty in this country.
Are there potential electoral implications for this? Like, does this kind of nudge Nevada to light red or no?
I think it was. I think it was important in the past election. I think it was important in Nevada. It's hard to say, but I do think that this was something that, you got a lot of waiters and waitresses out there, servers, who this will make a difference for them, and it feels very tangible.
Like,
Yeah,
per
one of the
capita, they
few-
have to. It looks
I
like
was just gonna say-
only 5% of Nevada workforce are tipped employees. I thought it was much more than that, but
Well, but there's one of the few pockets of a powerful labor movement in this country is the Nevada Culinary Workers Union. And so, I think they are in favor of this policy. But again, I think that just goes to the Democrats' lack of leadership. Look, I mean, you have to be willing to just say, look, there's a better way and a worse way to do this. For instance, Bernie, when all of these union leaders, not union workers, but when all these union leaders came out and said, I don't like Medicare for all because, oh, that takes away a big chip that we negotiate for our workers.
Right.
Bernie didn't play that bullshit. He didn't say, oh, you're right, I just have to radically change my policy. He said, no, this is a good policy. He stuck to his guns, and he's stuck to his guns on that policy for the last 40 years. And that's one of the reasons he has such a high approval rating, is because, look, agree or disagree with him, it's a big coalition. You're going to get the genuine output from Bernie Sanders. He's not putting his shit through a consultant filter.
He's not means testing it.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I mean, the tax on tips thing is a great example of that. Look, if you want to hate me, the 5% of people, even in Nevada, that work in the hospitality industry, fine, fair enough. But look, we have to understand what is and isn't the cause of poverty in this country, and what is and isn't the solvency for it. And until we inject that ethos into people, of course they're going to continue to support these marginal policies on the edge, because they think it has a much bigger impact than it does, because no one's willing to tell them the truth.
I think the question, though, is that, like, I would love it if we had the choice of, okay, no tax on tips, or, larger standard deduction, or even better, universal basic income. But basically the choice on the table right now is no tax on tips or no policy to help anybody. And so, I think that makes it difficult to oppose when there's no other possibility to work with this administration to get something else.
Yeah, I think that's what I said before, that I think the fairest argument is, hey, like, look, it's just a difficult thing to vote against in such a trying environment. But look, at the very least, there's no Democrat coming out and saying, look, I voted for it reluctantly. I think it's woefully incomplete. Look, we need this, that, and the other. Democrats are terrible on tax policy and fiscal policy, as well as Republicans are. It's just that Democrats, at the very least, don't want to cut social services, but they're still hesitant to raise taxes on the rich. They're still hesitant to expand public services to the extent that it would actually radically reduce poverty in this country. And that's just really, really bad, right? I mean, it's bad, at the very most, because it leaves so many millions of people in poverty. But it also makes this country, a worse place to live. And, for our children, there's a generational justice thing. Inequality is a big problem. And, hopefully, whoever the Democratic nominee is in 2028, whoever that ends up being, I hope they take this issue a little bit more seriously. I think that one of the things that led to so many Bernie Trump voters is that Bernie, for like his entire first primary campaign, it was a noun and a verb, and the top 1% have 80% of the new income, right? Like that resonated to a slightly broader coalition of people than the current Democratic messaging on these issues. And to be fair, something that I've talked about on this show and other shows is, it's not like the Democrats historically are great on not cutting the welfare state when you look at Bill Clinton's administration.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so, that hasn't been the case for, you could say, contemporary Democrats. I don't think Biden can have the same criticism as Bill Clinton in that regard. But look, there are a lot of people in this country that have very negative experiences with the welfare state because of the frameworks passed under the Clinton administration.
Correct.
And it's very important to move away from that. Hopefully, we have a Democrat that takes the welfare state as seriously as Biden took industrial policy. Combine the two, you got a near perfect Democrat.
First of all, I want to talk about progressive politics going into 2028. I know we're a little bit far removed. Obviously, everybody on this panel is progressive, I would say. Obviously, the progressive,
you're center right.
Jesus Christ. Everybody on this panel is progressive, right? We want to see progressive succeed. Obviously, they were not successful in 2016. They were not successful in 2020. Does there have to be some kind of shift in strategy? Because whatever they were trying before was just simply not resonating with enough primary voters. Do you have any thoughts about how they can, or you spoke to it earlier, is it just about having an aggressive media schedule? Is it changing the messaging? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I honestly think that the Democratic base has shifted somewhat. I mean, when you look now at the way the Democratic base feels about media institutions, how they feel about their own, elected leadership in the Democratic Party is just night and day. So like in 2020, if you look at what happened with Bernie, comes in second in Iowa, he wins in New Hampshire, he wins in Nevada, and then he comes into South Carolina. And there is a realization among, Obama world and among liberal media of like, okay, well, we were hoping it was Pete or Amy or one of these Beto or one of these other people, but it's really our only option to stop Bernie is Joe Biden. And so there was a coalescing, bunch of people dropped down, Obama was making phone calls, all those sorts of things happen. And because you had a Democratic base that still had so much trust with those media outlets and with their own sort of like Democratic Party gatekeepers, man, that thing turned on a dime. Now, that's not cheating. That's just like using the nature of the Democratic base as it existed. But it required there be that high level of trust between the, elected Democratic leadership and the media institutions and the Democratic base. And I do not think that same level of trust exists anymore. I think there is, I think the liberal base has been somewhat radicalized by Trump 2.0, by the manifest failures and capitulation of some of their favorite media heroes, of some of their previous favorite political heroes. And I think that has fundamentally changed the dynamic. So, as one example, Hutch, the Fight Oligarchy tour, when reporters have gone out and talked to the people that are there, it's not just, there are Bernie bros, but it's not just Bernie bros. It's a lot of just like a broad spectrum of Democratic voters. So, I think Trump 2.0 has probably made the ground more fertile for progressive politics than it was previously.
In terms of potential, maybe, but when I look at the trends in 2024, the progressive candidates on average did a little bit worse than the more moderate candidates. And so, to your point, I guess we'll see how that plays out. I want to see more than just like, oh, this time it'll be different. Like I would want to see some kind of like substantive like change in strategy, because I'm not confident that if progressive candidates keep doing the same thing, that they will get a different result this next time. So.
Are you talking about in a Democratic primary or in general election?
In the primaries. So like, it's the primaries. It's the candidate's job to convince a plurality or a majority of voters that they're the one for the job. So the fact that Bernie did so well early on in 2020 was exciting for me and everything like that. But at the end of the day, you have to anticipate that the moderates are going to coalesce around a single candidate.
No, I agree with that.
That's going to happen again in 2028.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. What I would say is that I think this time you add to the appeal of the progressive politics the fact that the liberal establishment way of fighting Trump proved to be a failure, proved to not be up to the task. And if you had to say what the defining issue in 2020 was that led Joe Biden to victory, it wasn't that people were like, "Oh my God, I'm so inspired by Joe Biden," or even like, "Oh, I think his claimed his healthcare plan was that he never actually."
Well, they wanted an off-ramp from Trump, right?
They thought he was the guy who could win. That was the central issue. And I think number one, in the end, the analysis of whether that sort of status quo politics was actually the thing that could defeat Trumpism, I think that has changed. And also, I think what we've seen in Trump 2.0 is by and large, the people who have been most aggressive in fighting and challenging Trump are from the left of the party, are from the progressive wing of the party. And I do think that fundamentally changes things. So next time around, not only are you going to be fighting on issues like healthcare and, minimum wage and unions and Gaza and all of these things, you're also going to be fighting on, okay, when it was uncomfortable and, all these people were bending the knee to Trump, what were you doing? What were you saying? And I think that may be the most, I would love if it was like an ideological fight, but I actually think that might be the most potent litmus test of 2028, because it has been so thoroughly disgusting to see people who would have claimed, they're worried about Trump and threat to democracy and fascism and all these things. Then when he comes into office, act like it's just another day at the office.
So I kind of worry though about, and I do think this was kind of a problem with Bernie, is that Bernie's campaign style is to be kind of very issue focused and not really kind of personally attack anybody that he's running against. At the same time that you had so much vitriol and so many attacks against Bernie by both Biden surrogates and Hillary surrogates in 2016, Bernie was very hesitant to really directly attack Hillary Clinton. And unfortunately, I don't know. He
didn't have a killer instinct.
I see a lot of that same energy from AOC, right? It does seem like she's a little bit less hesitant to, like, for instance, you say like, look, one of the big things is going to be, what were you doing, Mr. Newsom, on your podcast with Steve Bannon? Like, that's a great line in a debate. I just don't know if AOC is the type to say something like that.
I
hopefully
think she will.
but-
Listen, I think right now there's no because she issued a statement after Connolly said he was stepping down as ranking member. She's no longer on oversight, but through some procedural, wizardry, there was an opportunity for her to assume that post again. It was going to be more of a stretch. And she says she's not going to throw her name in the ring. She goes, I think the culture within the Democratic Party to prioritize seniority over everything else is still there. I'm not convinced that I would have a fair shot or whatever, even now after this happened with Connolly. I think she's just got razor sharp political instincts. I think she's known now. There are times to lock arms with her fellow Democrats, even if they're more moderate than she is, because they are the lesser of two evils, or they're the better option. They're strength in numbers. She knows how to coalition build. That was part of the reason that Biden's domestic accomplishments were so successful, is because, Ron Klain, Biden's former chief of staff,
Yeah.
he roped in the Progressive Caucus. Ron Klain said after he left office that the Progressive Caucus were more strident defenders and gave him and Biden less fits, at least in the first 2 years, than the moderates were. And I think you put her in a position where she's in across the stage from Gavin Newsom. I'll bet you $1,000 that she will go for the throat if she has to do it. Like she would do it. I think she would do it.
Look,
I
I
mean,
still have
hopefully you're right.
I still have my questions about her. If she's, if she's ready for, if she has that killer instinct, if she has, the governing chops, you could put that up against like a Tim Walz who's actually done the thing. I still have my questions as well. But what I will just say is that she has impressed me in this moment. She has really impressed me. She has shown me a level of leadership and courage in a moment when many others haven't. And so, I'm a lot more optimistic about how she would be as a leader than I was before.
Before we wrap up, Hutch, was there anything else you had before we wrap up? Because I've got a couple of questions for Crystal.
No, shoot, go ahead.
All right, Connor Boy, you got anything else?
No, go for it, Josiah. I'm living in your world, okay?
This is
We all are.
We're living and learning. Okay, so I'm curious. I've seen you have you had Dave Smith on. I think it was earlier today on Breaking Points. And what's interesting is I know that right now there seems to be this overall project of coalition building. Kyle's doing it. You're doing it. I feel like we're doing it here, Live and Learn, and also in other our separate channels as well. Are you feeling that people who have been in the Trump orbit, not just your co-host, but others as well that you've talked to, like Dave Smith, do you feel them pulling away from Trump? And do you feel a vibe shift? Because I was kind of getting the impression of one from Dave Smith in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure with Dave. And we had him on previously because he had made some comments, I think around the Trump 100-day mark, maybe at something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. And anyway, he made some comments that were quite critical. And so we had him on and I did the whole how are you feeling? And this isn't going that well. And, and he was very open about the blind spots he had, about the things that he didn't expect. And look, Dave is a very ideological libertarian. And so there are going to be issues where Dave Smith and I are never going to see eye to eye. But I can appreciate someone who has an ideology and has principles and is willing to stick to it. And I think he is one of those people who is, genuinely trying to grapple with the moment, has been critical in a way that I'm sure has been uncomfortable for some of his audience who probably, showed up during the Trump campaign because he was supporting Trump, et cetera. He said something interesting to me. We'll see. Put a pin in this. Trump relied on this bro podcast sphere, the Rogans and Theo Von and Tim Dillon and whoever the other ones are. And, they're not quite the same as the just Trump sycophant media world. Now, I would say, I find much of what they have to say very disappointing and give him way too much of a pass and way too friendly to him, etc. But you have seen at least a few comments from them that are not just on Trump's nuts all the time. And that was kind of interesting to me that he was noting, because, he's a comedian. He's in those circles. He's good friends with, all the guys I think I just mentioned. And he seemed to feel that they had some critiques as well. Now, I don't want to overstate it, because if you look at the polling, most Trump supporters, they still
They're cool
support
with
Trump.
it.
They still think
Yeah.
it's great. You know, they believe all the lies. They're just not paying attention. I don't know. I can't explain it at this point, so I don't want to overstate it. But I do think that we've seen a few who have grappled with it. And, you know, certainly Saagar has been, Emily has been, and, you know, I've appreciated their willingness to do that. It's honestly, it's sort of like essential for us to continue, like, you know, to continue to do the thing that we're doing. But yeah, there's
because I
there's
can't
something there.
imagine that. I mean, it was a tough premise from the beginning. You know, and because I want to make sure I remember the lore correctly. You were at the Hill on the Rising before
Yes.
Breaking Points, right?
Yes.
So this whole premise of, you know, right and left, you know, come together in this sort of like was it Crossfire on CNN back in the day? That's a tough premise to swing, and especially in situations like this where it's not simply about you think, you know, the marginal tax rate for top earners should be here and Saagar thinks it's here. You know, like the big one for me, where I'm really interested to hear from somebody like Dave Smith who is a libertarian, is, you know, the guys from FIRE, this right-wing libertarian free speech group, they said it explicitly in an interview with Mehdi Hassan. They said the legal director of FIRE said Trump's war on free speech is unprecedented in scope, scale, and severity. In other words,
Yeah.
objectively, Trump is worse on free speech than Joe Twitter files Biden.
Yes.
And so if free speech is a priority for you, you have to reckon with the guy that your guy's worse. Your guy sucks on this issue.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just interesting. And I don't envy your position there, because be it your coworkers or your guests, you've got to tread that lightly. And that's why I was curious, that because you interact with them and interview them, are you sensing that kind of recognition? Like, oh shit, you know, he is not what he was cracked up to be.
I think if you have to grapple with people who are not in like a Trump sycophant bubble, like if you actually have to engage with facts and reality, it becomes very difficult to not have at least some critiques of what's going on. And, you know, I think that's what we've really seen. You know, the one that has been the most probably like emotionally difficult to navigate, I would say for me personally, has been immigration, where Saagar has been a very hardline immigration restrictionist. I
saw that debate.
Find that morally, it's, you know, not where I am at all. And when the Alien Enemies Act was first invoked, you know, I think he knows JD Vance. This is one of his friends. And I think he just trusted, like, surely when they say they're sending the worst of the worst, there must be some process. And I was coming in knowing that they'd already sent people to Guantanamo Bay who had no criminal infractions, who were not anything approaching the worst of the worst. I knew there'd been no due process. And so, you know, I really give him credit, because it's an issue that he does feel very strongly about, that after we had a very like heated and long debate on it, that he did reckon with it and did change his mind. And I really give him a lot of credit for that, because it's just as easy to dig in your heels. And, you know, when you are challenged, like, that's a really human reaction to not want to be proven wrong or admit that you got something wrong or whatever. And he didn't do that. So, you know, I have been really grateful to that. By the way, Saagar just had a baby. He's out for a little while, but
yeah, I saw that. That's awesome. And
Congrats.
congratulations to him and his partner.
Okay.
That's, I guess then my last question, this was a fun one, is Kyle is well known for his, shall we say, I'm going to say unhinged tweets, which I love. We all love here at Live and Learn. Has he ever taken you off guard with the shit that he says on Twitter? Like the Nancy Mace Beans thing, of course, is iconic. That thing has 8 million likes or whatever.
that was a work of art. That was genius right there.
Is it one of those things where you're like, God damn it, Kyle? Or it's like, you fell in love with him all over again? Like, what are your reactions?
No, it's more of the latter. I'll go,
Yeah.
and it's so funny too, because sometimes I'll go into, like, you know, some Republican tweet or whatever, and I'll open up the replies, and there he is, first one in, like, fuck you or whatever he's saying. I'm like,
So you're saying not a single time has he tweeted something where you gave him sort of a sideways glance?
no.
Wow.
I'm
okay.
like, that's my man. That's
Okay.
him.
So does
Yeah.
that mean you're
good
as
fit.
I'm not vouching
unhinged
for all
as
the
he
old
is?
ones, okay? Just since we've been together. All right, let's
Yeah.
draw a timeline here.
Are you familiar with the account Old Kyle Kalinske tweets?
Yes, part of
They
She
are.
runs
before.
it.
But
She
yes,
fucking
I-
runs it. She doesn't. Kyle, spoiler alert. It's
That is-
Crystal. Yeah.
That is a treasure trove
Oh
of
my God.
peak unhinged Kyle.
Truly. But yeah, no, I just see him. Occasionally he'll ask me like, is this too far? Before he sends it. So
That's
I
funny.
always, I let him do his thing.
That's awesome. That's funny.
Yeah.
It's been a source of levity in these trying times because you're right. Every time I'm on Twitter and I happen to like hit, I'm like, this is a really stupid thing this Republican said. First thing I see, and Kyle's right there. First response every time with a meme, a fuck you, something in there. So yeah, I had to ask that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, if Hutch and Econo Boy have nothing else, I really appreciate you coming here.
That was fun, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, where can people, I know because you're on Breaking Points and Twitter and everything else. Is Crystal Kyle and friends, and is there other Substack? Where can everybody find you?
Just Twitter, Crystal Ball, and then all the stuff is there. So yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you so much. Good luck watching what's left of the Knicks game and tending to Kyle. I'll do a wellness check on him tomorrow. See if he's still with us.
See how it went. Yeah, I haven't checked the score or anything. All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate you all. It was
Crystal,
fun.
thanks for your time.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you so
pleasure.
much.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
That was awesome.
Oh, we're still on. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't end the stream.
Gotta say goodbye to the audience, Hutch.
Yeah,
You can't just
goddamn.
leave the audience hanging.
I was ready to get the fuck out of here, boys.
You know what it is? You just don't want to spend time with us anymore.
That's
Something
what it
happened.
is.
No, I'm jacked to the tits on Vyvanse now. Now I want to go take a walk is what I want to do.
Dude, I wish I need to start like doing that. Like,
Ugh, I have become fat as fuck since Trump took office, man. Just eating way too much. You know, I'm trying to emulate my leader. You know, I'm just an American. That's
what
what
are you
it
talking
is.
about? He's 6'3" and 200 pounds.
I'm at the point now
Great
where like
point.
when I come into the room and sit down, I suck in my gut intentionally. So that's new for me.
Really?
Wow.
Wait, you gained
Yeah.
weight?
Well, no, I mean I'm 200 pounds. I used to be 145, and fucking it feels like 50 of those pounds went to my stomach, and then 5 went to my like face.
Hutch,
is how that weight got
how old are you,
distributed.
Hutch?
42, 41,
What-
turning.
Come on,
Turning
Hutch.
42.
You look so goddamn good for his.
Hutch,
in fact,
I was just gonna say, Hutch, your prime TRT age. Just get jacked on TRT, man. Come on.
I've thought about it. I've thought
what's
about that.
TRT?
Stop thinking. You know, don't
What's
use your
TRT?
brain.
It's testosterone replacement therapy. It's like
see.
legal steroids.
I
That's
see.
what every single man above the age of 35 is on nowadays. It feels like, you know, it's like, fuck, it's not even that expensive. It's like $50 a month and you just get jacked all of a sudden. It's like, would you pay $50 a month to be jacked? I mean, I feel like I would. you know?
Jacked what? Okay.
We're not giving you
We're- I
anything
just-
on
I
that
didn't know
one.
if there
just,
was a good-
uh,
Another
Wait,
word.
wait.
Yeah.
Did you finish? I assume you finished
Yes.
Andor. Yes, you did.
Yes,
Oh my
I did.
goodness, bro,
Yes.
that's like a top 5 show for me. I think
Yes,
it's like
it-
Deadwood and The Leftovers and Andor and a couple other. I'm not sure. Econo
No.
Boy, did you start yet or no?
No, I'm still working my way through The Last of Us, and I will start the final season of The Handmaid's Tale. Probably, I know the season finale comes out on the 27th. I think that's like a Sunday or something like that. So I'll probably start watching it then. And then Andor, I don't know. Disney is just kind of. I hear what you're saying. Okay, I hear what you guys are saying. Oh, Andor's good, and it's different than all the other shit that Disney's produced. But I don't know. Disney's kind of. They've almost like Marvel superhero movied me out. Of,
I get it. No,
you know, wanting to
I,
watch more Star Wars stuff because they just
I get
produce
it.
so much slop.
I get it. I get your concerns. I get your skepticism. This is like just. It is like a.
I can't do it again,
It-
Hutch. I watched all of the fucking, Boba Fett show, and it was
Fuck
awful.
Boba Fett. Fuck that. Fuck the Mandalorian. Here's my hot take. I know everyone like just prostrates themselves before the Mandalorian. I thought season 1 sucked. I thought season 2 sucked. I thought season 3 sucked. It was not
Super
enter-
overrated show, and Boba Fett was even
100%.
worse. Obi-Wan was good. I even liked Ahsoka. I even liked the fucking what was the other one?
I didn't like Ahsoka. I thought Obi-Wan only was good on coasting on pure nostalgia from seeing Ewan McGregor back and Hayden Christensen.
He's right.
as Vader.
He's right, Hutch.
Yeah, I was not
but,
a fan.
but Andor is like a totally different
Yeah.
project. Like it almost feels. I mean, the guy Tony Gilroy who was in charge of it was not a Star Wars fan.
He wrote Michael
like,
Clayton.
It's which is like a totally but it's just a show about the dawn of a revolution. It's fucking so inspiring, and the dialogue and the characters and the story is just so satisfying. It's just a league above every
I'll
other
watch-
show
I'll
on
watch it one
Disney
day.
Plus.
Is the season 2? Is it a series finale? or
Yes.
are they doing
It's
a
series
third
finale.
season?
It's done. It's over.
Yeah,
Okay,
it-
okay. If it's a
it
series
ends, like,
finale, I'll have to watch.
Yeah, it ends like moments before Rogue One begins, so it's like a direct tie-in
Okay.
to
It's
that.
like leading into that's the stories. It's like leading into Rogue
Yeah, it's
One. I
basically
guess.
Yeah,
a
but-
prequel. The entire thing was pitched as a prequel to Rogue One.
But they have these like self-contained arcs within each season. So there's like 4 different arcs in each of the 2 seasons. So it's not like, it is a direct prequel to Rogue One, but it's very much like its own thing. And it's very complementary to Rogue One. Like when you watch Rogue
Alright.
One afterwards,
And
I think
Rogue
it-
One
it-
was great. Everyone loved Rogue One, so I've got to watch it. I've got to watch
Rogue
it.
One
yeah.
has been the Rogue One. I go back and forth. I obviously I play up some of my love of Rise of Skywalker as a meme, but I just genuinely enjoyed seeing Ian McDiarmid back as the Emperor. But Rogue One and The Last Jedi, I don't think there's really been a great sequel movie, but those two I think are the better ones. The Last Jedi to me, like 2/3 of it was boring, like the space chase and the shit on Canto Bight, the casino planet. But like, it tried to do some cool stuff with the hand it was dealt by JJ. And Rogue One was uneven, but that's because I think Gilroy came in to do like some reshoots and stuff like that.
yeah, he
So,
took over.
yeah.
There was a
Yeah.
director before him, and he had to take over.
Yeah.
But he patched it up like pretty well, all things
Yeah.
considered. Like the last 45 minutes of Rogue One are just fucking like it's like an epic war film. It's like
Yeah.
an epic battle, and it's done so well. But the
Yeah.
writing and the characters in particular, the whole story of Andor, you just become you become invested in these characters like very, very, very deeply, and the payoffs are just so cathartic and rewarding. It's brilliant. It's brilliant TV. It's brilliant.
It's funny you say that, because I was thinking about today, one of the things I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get better, and this affects pop culture reactions and also like fitness and everything. I'm trying to get a better work-life balance, and I'm still a one-man show, and I'm after having a conversation with a Conaboy after like a live and learn recently, and thinking actually about bringing on like an editor to free up some more time and stuff like that, and so I can do Substack and other things as well. But one of the things I always planned on doing, because I have the channel for it, it's Pondering Politics. Outside of Pondering Pop Culture channel, I've done exactly one video on it, because I just love like talking about this shit. And Steve Shives, our buddy who was on Live and Learn, I don't know if you all remember, like when he's not talking politics, he's like talking about Star Trek and other shows as well. So his is a blend of politics and pop culture. But he did a good video that came out today or yesterday about, he doesn't like Andor, but he says it's the most important show on TV right now. So it's a really cool little mini essay that he did.
It's an interesting contradiction.
It is, yeah, and he addresses that early on. He's like, I'm going to tell you things which are seemingly mutually exclusive. Not a big fan of Andor as a piece of drama, and I think it is the most important TV show out there right now. And he gets into why. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking about texting you, Hutch. I'm trying to find the time. I'd love to find the time to do more like pop culture things on like my other channel as well, and like even if it's a stream or whatever. There's some good TV and good books out there, like things by KJ Parker, who's my like favorite low fantasy writer. Yeah, I feel like it's been a good like 2 decades of pop culture.
It has been. It has been. The only unfortunate part, again, the only unfortunate part is these ridiculously long production times. I'm sick of it. Okay. I'm just saying, okay, back when I was a kid, you could expect 38 episodes of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air every year for 5 years. I don't know how
Yeah.
they did it. They just did it somehow. They fucking did like 30 episode seasons. And look, a lot of it was anime-like. A lot of it was filler.
Do you like
A
Fresh
lot of
Prince?
it wasn't great.
That's actually how
Yeah.
Andor begins every episode. It's like, this is a story all about how Cassian's life got flipped, turned upside down.
Exact same intro song and everything. Will
Mhm.
Smith, of course. It's like, I don't know how the fuck they were able to do these crazy long seasons every single year. It probably was a lot of violating workers' rights. Oh, we're on the left. We're not supposed to do that. Okay, but if it means producing good media, then can we make an exception for our principles on workers' rights, guys? How do we feel about this?
It's kind of a wash because there's just so much. Like, I mean, there's a lot of slop out there, but there's like so much quality shit just all the time. Like, I've just been on a good run of shows. Like, if you guys have Apple TV, The Studio is phenomenal. Like, really, really intelligent, funny comedy. Righteous Gemstones, fucking Last of Us. There was another HBO show.
I
that
haven't
just
watched
ended.
Righteous Gemstones yet, but I did watch Vice Principals, and I don't know why I like that fucking show where,
That was a
where
great
Walton
show.
Goggins like
Yeah.
make a move, motherfucker. They got into the snap fight. It's just so funny. I love that show.
Yeah.
If I mean, you should definitely watch The White Lotus if you haven't watched that. If you like Walter Goggins in season 4, he's fucking brilliant.
I watched
Mr.
the
In
first
Between-
season. I've not seen my fiance now. She binged like all 3 seasons. It was intense, but I only watched the first season.
Look, I don't do this. I don't know if I've ever given a strong recommendation for a TV show, okay? But here's what I will say. I've said this to several people. Literally 0 people have taken me up on this, okay? However, you guys are missing the fuck out. There's a TV show. It's called Mr. In Between. All right. It's 3 seasons. It's on FXX, I think. It's like an Australian TV. Nobody's heard of this show. I think like 200,000 people watched each episode as it came onto the air, right? However, all right, it's an insanely good show. All right. Imagine this. Guy from Australia, basically no significant writing or acting credits at all. He says at like 50 years old, I'm going to write a TV show and star in it about a guy who basically plays an assassin who's also just like a suburban dad, essentially. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds played out. This sounds like I've heard the same story 1,000
Sounds like
times.
that one with that SNL star Bill Hader. Bill Hader?
Oh, yeah, Barry.
which
Okay.
is another brilliant show.
Barry ripped off this show. I'm convinced because Barry was an awesome show as well. But imagine Barry, but just like I'm going to say 50% better. I love Mr. In Between. The greatest part about Mr. In Between is this. 3 seasons, it stays grounded the entire time, and only 25-minute episodes. You can watch this entire series in like a day. Okay, it's like maybe 10 hours of content, the entire series. It's wildly good. I cannot believe that this guy's never written or acted in anything else before.
Is it on Hulu?
It's I don't know, just I'm not going to encourage you to steal it, but obviously there's ways to get any TV show if you're clever enough. I'm not sure where it's on. I think maybe Hulu is the right answer.
It's on Hulu. It's on Hulu.
Yeah. Okay, and the last thing I'll say, this guy, again, no acting, no writing credits outside of this one show. It's won like every single fucking award there is to win in Australian cinema and TV. Completely wild that this show even exists, okay? And I love it. Watch the whole season. I've watched the whole series like 3 or 4 times. Again, it's only like 12 hours of content. Anyway,
Speaking of great Australian shows, did you ever watch the show Rake with Richard Roxburgh?
Never heard of it. Is
Richard
it about rakes?
Roxburgh was the bad guy in Moulin Rouge in 2001, and he was Dracula in the Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman and Kate Beckinsale. And so he stars in this like legal comedy called Rake, where he's like this highly dysfunctional but brilliant lawyer, and it's really good. It's really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's just so much good. Like, and I shouldn't say 20 years. I'm gonna go back.
We should make
30
our own
years.
TV show.
We could live and learn.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Wait. Have you guys seen Please Don't Destroy the Treasure of Foggy Mountain? Please Don't Destroy. It's like an SNL skit that they do like once a month or whatever. Conan O'Brien has a cameo role. I started to watch like the first 10 minutes of that. Fucking hilarious. But I'm saying the past 30 years have been like really good, not 20, because you have Babylon 5, you have the Battlestar Galactica remake, you have Buffy, Angel, Alias, you've got Deep Space Nine. Like the 90s slap pretty hard too, as far as like pretty good stories go. Breaking Bad, obviously, although I preferred Better Call Saul. So I'm saying like we should do this more. It can't all be about like stress politics.
Hutch you had a movie podcast at one point. I'm pretty sure. I mean, let's
Very short-lived.
What was it
start it
called?
up.
It doesn't matter.
Well, fuck you. Wait, I don't know my Hutch lore. Or is this like?
I don't even honestly remember the name of it.
classified?
It was like it was like 10 years ago.
Look,
We did
I
like
followed
7 episodes.
Hutch's entire career. Again, from the very first episode, old Call of Duty commentary days fan of Hutch. All right. I remember everything.
Why are you calling me right wing? You should know that I was making videos about like legalizing gay marriage back in like
Look,
fucking 2010.
I remember the gay sexes and gay video. That was
I said
transformative.
gay sex doesn't necessarily make you gay.
Okay, that's more nuanced. That's true. I remember your 2016 presidential campaign. I mean, who could forget that? That was very
I
inspirational.
did. I had a Hutch 2016 shirt. That's wow.
That's
You're
right.
really deep in the lore,
Right.
buddy.
Host Migration. I mean, that was a great podcast. I mean, that was like 10 episodes. So, I'm just
It always
saying.
trips me out when people fucking can delve into my history quite like that.
See,
I have
need to
no
do this. I
filter
need
with
to
my
fucking-
chat. So they know the fucking most intimate details. Like somebody will make a joke about having like a leftward leaning penis, and I'll be like, "What? How the fuck do they know that?" I'm
That's
like,
true.
"Oh, yeah,
You have an 11-inch penis. I remember that. That was
wow, that
unbelievable.
now that is a fucking very obscure reference. That was a very particular episode of a thing that I did long
right.
time ago. Yeah.
Found out
Damn,
Hutch's
so
penis
like
size.
I need to
That was
dive
great.
deeper into the Hutch lore. You know,
There's a
Hutch
lot.
is-
I mean, but unfortunately in Machinima Respawn, they deleted fucking everything, which is honestly a good thing because there was a lot of fucking cancelable offenses in that trove of content. Like
Yes, it was.
honestly, I think they did my
Yeah.
career a favor, but yeah.
do you miss the because like I know you like cut your teeth as a gaming streamer, but like do you miss those days where you were only occasionally in the weeds of politics? Like was it simpler, more rewarding times?
I don't know, but I'm not an overly nostalgic person, and like my outside life, like my real life, was very kind of chaotic at the same time. So there was a lot of like fun, and I have a lot of fond memories of those times. But I've for sure evolved as a human being in the last 15 years. So when I look back on that chaos, like I like the structure of my life right now, and so I wouldn't want to go back to that.
But I mean, just
but-
content alone, like if you could be the same Hutch, this more advanced, evolved person, but instead of talking politics, you were just playing video games.
Playing video games.
Would you? Do you
I still
wish?
play games all the time. Like
Oh, you
I
do?
still play a lot of games. It's just to me, it's just it always like felt a bit because the gaming debates get really fucking heated. Gamers are very toxic and they get so angry and opinionated. And I've always sort of had this opinion, even though I was in the gaming space, of like, this is a lot of energy to spend on skill-based matchmaking or like a feature of a game. So I always kind of felt that way, but with politics that always felt consequential to me. So when we talk about politics, it feels like we're talking about something that like actually matters rather than the gender of a character in a video game. And
Are
so-
you bigger now than you were then, as far as like viewership and stuff like that? Because
no, definitely not. No, back then it was like explosion, like millions of views every month and everything.
So like, do you wish? Because again, I'm pretty normie and I don't pay attention to like a lot of video game streamers, but Asmongold's a video game streamer, right? And-
Yeah, but he also comments on like pop culture and politics and just
Gotcha,
whatever.
okay.
He's kind of whatever. Yeah.
Variety streamer.
I didn't know basically if you had continued on like the purely gaming route, if you could have been like a counterweight to some right-wing dipshit like that,
I would always go on these breaks because I had undiagnosed fucking bipolar. So I would just kind of go crazy for a little bit and then my life would spin out of control. And so like I would kind of disappear for like 6 months and come back and disappear.
Oh
for 6
shit!
months
So
and-
those were long hiatuses. Like there were.
Yeah.
there was a lo-
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
And
hard to be a
so-
Hutch fan for a while. It's like, fuck, this guy makes a video twice a year or some shit. I don't know.
like
Yeah, I would go off-
ContraPoints. You're like
I would go-
ContraPoints, like once a year.
I would go off on my like manic induced like chaotic spirit quests for a little bit and just blow my life up and then come back. And so like with content, you got to be pretty consistent. Like some people can take long breaks and come back and everything's fine. And there's like some creators that make like one video a year, like ContraPoints, and she gets like crazy views. But for the most part with creators, you got to be like, it's better to have a schedule. It's better to, and I still kind of struggle with that. I'm better about it now, but
Dude,
yeah, consistency is really important. And I would take these like long breaks. So
yeah, like that's the challenge is like I'm finding out more and more like YouTube burnout is real. Like it's amazing. Like the work ethic that Luke or Mockler and Jack Cocciarella and others, like it's I'm still just relatively young at 34, but it's like it's tough. I don't know how some of these people do it.
well, in the
mean-
beginning, it's like intoxicating, right? So like when you're building a channel and it really kind of starts to like blow up, every day feels like you're just coursing with adrenaline and you're just, it's very stimulating and exciting and everything. But that does wear off. Like that's not your dopamine levels cannot stay at that level for too long. And so
Well, especially like I find like even just the inherent nature of what we're covering. Like, I mean, I don't know about you guys. Like, so I'm not a huge sports guy, but like the one sport I've always loved is basketball because like it's that sweet spot. You don't have to deal. Football, you got 22 players, 4-hour game, 10 minutes of continuous action. But basketball, It's half that time, half the number of players. It check. And I love going to basketball games. But I live in Charlotte, so we have the Hornets, and they're not good. They're not good. But damn it, I've adopted them anyway. But like one of the things I found is like whenever I get a basketball team, so like when I lived in Louisville, we don't have a pro team, so it's the Louisville Cardinals, and they were really good, college basketball franchise, one of the best in the country when Rick Pitino was in charge. But like I get emotionally invested in that, and so I'd be pacing in my living room watching the game, or like intense when I'm there in person. So I am about politics. Like there's like a deep like emotional investment, and so like covering the latest shit that Trump does, like. I feel like somebody like David Pakman, if he is emotionally disturbed by what he is covering, he conceals it very well. He's got like a Zen-like quality to him. I think Akana Boy's got a bit of this. I struggle with it because it's like it's intense and it makes me feel intense things, and so that also exacts a toll. Do you guys?
Well, you have to go over the nihilist curve, right? Where eventually you just start to say, look. Who even cares what happens anymore? Who gives a fuck? All right, it's just gonna happen how it's gonna happen. All right, that's the key. Josiah, you're behind the curve. You got to get ahead of it. That's where Pakman is. It's where I am. It's where all these political commentators are. All right, we've lost all of our control and power. We might as well just enjoy the ride.
Well, with the Trump era, it's just you're inundated every day with just deluge after deluge of just, I mean, I don't know what else to call it besides just, it's just absurdity. Everything about the current climate feels absurd. And that is the effect that Trump brings into everything. And like, we endeavor to be informative people. So like, our whole pitch to people is like, hey, listen to us talk about the current events and sort of like dissect information and stuff. But there gets to a point where some days it's so absurd all the time where you wake up and it's just like, shit's fucked. I don't know what to tell you, bro. Like that's kind of the energy you have, or the energy I have in those moments. And you kind of power through. And then like, that's why with live streaming, it helps to have chat so you can like bounce off them and then kind of change the energy a little bit. But sometimes it's like, it takes a little bit of motivation to like get going and start the day and that's like another day of this. He's just a challenging guy to cover. It's just exhausting,
It is. It is. And one of the things I don't know about you guys, but one of the things I deeply struggle with is like just the hypocrisy of it. Like I'm one of those people, like it's much easier for me to like Steve Bannon, I think is repulsive, but Steve Bannon's not a hypocrite. Like he's just almost like, again, has a Zen-like honesty to him. Like, yeah, we're going to flood the zone with shit. Yes, we are going to do this. Yes, of course we would have an issue if the shoe was on the other foot, but like, he's so authentic in his fascism, I guess.
He's an ideologue. There's like the ideologue versus the grifters,
That I can actually process that and manage him better. Like he doesn't trigger me. Steve Bannon doesn't trigger me. It's really like the hypocrisy of the moment that also I'm wrestling with it. Because again, of course, when I see like the $400 million Qatari jet, my first or second thought is, what if fucking Biden did this? Or what if fucking Obama did this? And that's something else. Like I am behind the curve on that. I am trying like, just get over it. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They not only don't care, they love it. And then it's like, should we be hypocrites? And should we be smug about the hypocrisy that we have? Like, should we be Scott Jennings from CNN? He got ripped a new one by Bill Maher recently. He's like, dude, if the shoe was on the other foot, you guys would be going ape shit, was the exact words. And Scott Jennings did his Scott Jennings things. He looked at the camera and smiled. Because he would, and he knows it, and it's just like, I don't know. That is probably that's the second single biggest part of this, which is like emotionally taxing.
I think it's hard for me personally to like, as soon as I find that I'm dealing with someone like that, it's very difficult for me to like, I usually try to remain very calm during debates, right? But it's very difficult for me to like not just call someone a dumb fuck and be like, you're a dumbass, right? Shut the fuck up, right? Like you're obviously
it comes
just
out with you
bullshitting
sometimes.
Here, right?
And you're like, oh shit, he's a fucking killer.
No, it does. Yeah, I've talked. I think I called. Oh fuck, what's his name? The like PF Young guy.
PF Young.
I called him a dumb fuck, right? Because he was being super bad faith in our conversation.
But you didn't even raise your voice. You were just like, PF, you dumb fuck.
No, yeah, I was like, what? I said something like, do you think the only, because he was saying like, oh, is your evidence a peer reviewed journal? I'm like, do you
That's
think the only kind of evidence is peer reviewed journals? Dumb fuck, right? I said something like that, and I don't know. I mean, it's difficult for me to, because if I'm in a conversation like that, it's just difficult for me to maintain that kind of decorum, because it's like, look, ultimately it's almost like you're not maintaining decorum with the framework of this conversation. And similarly, like if I was on a CNN panel with Scott Jennings, like fuck, dude,
It'd be
like it would
one
be
and
tough.
only.
It'd be like, and we're going to commercial break.
The FC,
Right?
there'd be so many bleeps. The FCC would be on your ass so much.
Like,
Well, I mean,
goddamn,
to
Scott.
to an extent, like politics is kind of a game, and like AOC recalled an anecdote with Nancy Mace one time, where like early on, and they were in the halls of Congress, and Nancy Mace had said something, I don't know, outrageous or wrong or whatever, and AOC confronted her on it, like off camera, like just them two, and Mace's response was like, "Whatever, this is all just a game." And that there's just a lot of that. There's like the Scott Jennings of the world. He knows what he's doing. He thinks the ends justify the means. So as long as like the conservative way of governance or whatever and culture, as long as that's preserved and uplifted, then it's okay to lie about stuff. And that there's just a lot of that. It's like an annihilation of the truth. There's just, the truth is just in full on assault. That's what Mon Mothma, her whole speech on the Senate and Andor was all about that. And I just thought that was so, fitting for the times that we live in. I'm sure that was intentional, but it is fucking exhausting, because these people do know that they're lying their fucking asses off half the time.
Yeah,
It's
but you
also
don't seem to get
difficult
triggered by
because-
it, and nor does Econo Boy. Like you guys seem to keep. So I'm saying I'm trying to learn where it's like even Pisco, I go back and forth when he says something like, I'm like, I'm trying to get.
No, that's okay.
Pisco-
People like that energy though. Just fucking,
Mhm. It comes
Pisco
natural.
is just a troll, okay? Don't listen to anything he
I
says.
love that guy.
Um,
I love it, and he's the same way too. That's what I'm saying. Like it's I think some people are in this space and do very well, performatively, where it's like it's just a job to them, and it's a performance, but like it's
Like when I
exhausting.
was on Tim Pool's show, right? Like I think he has I would say, I don't think he's a grifter, I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that he plays up a lot of positions, and like he does like have a character about him, I would say, but I don't know. It really does seem like he's just a conservative, essentially, right? But I did get some of that energy from Tim Pool going on his show, where it was like, oh yeah, real serious conversation, real serious, but like as soon as the camera shuts off, it's just like boom, flipped, switch flipped, like right back to having a normal cordial, just like, oh yeah, man, I'm gonna go see fucking Thunderbolts after this, and it's like, look,
Bro.
it's not that I can't have a cordial, like, I can have a jovial relationship with people who I politically disagree with. It's just, it's a little bit uncanny valley to just like directly see that flip or that switch get flipped, right, right in front of you, right?
Yeah, you're like
Especially when you consider all the damage he's fucking doing with his massive audience. Like Tim Pool, there was a recent episode he did with Adam Conover, and there were
How
some
was
clips
that?
so there were some clips that went viral that I thought made Adam look kind of not great, and I just got completely Facebooked, because I went into that debate thinking like Adam's going to be like, poor representation of the left or whatever. But it was one of the most embarrassing Tim Pool performances I've ever seen. Like, and I thought Adam did a really good job pinning him down on. They were talking about like Abrego Garcia and all this stuff, and the student that was deported for literally just penning an op-ed that was critical of Israel or critical of some school's response or whatever. And Tim was simultaneously saying that the reason that the administration gave for revoking her green card or deporting her was bad. But he said it was marginally good that Trump did that. And his reasoning was that because he's allowed to do that, well, technically it's legal. And Adam did a good job like focusing on that. And they stuck on that point for like 15 minutes. And Tim would go through these like three statements, one after he would cycle back and just kind of repeat his train of thought over and over and over again. And it was just utterly contradictory. It made no fucking sense. Like that guy will say whatever the fuck. Like Pisco did a really good job drilling him down. during their conversation, and forcing him to take the most absurd. Like Tim Pool is the master at debate broing himself into the just most insane contradictions, just over and over and over again. But he won't back down. He'll be like, Pisco made the point of like, so you called the BLM protests insurrections, but you wouldn't apply that to January 6th. And Tim Pool was like, no, I wouldn't do that. At first he denied saying it, and then Pisco goes, if you did say it, would you take that back now? No. And so it was like, yeah, he's just there's a lot of people like him in the space, and it's just really blackpilling.
I think it's part of the reason why I don't. I guess it's easier for me to not kind of mentally have such a hard time with these conversations the way that you're describing, Josiah, because I think that at the end of the day, look, like I mean, like on the decision to like go on Tim Pool's show, right? It's like, I understand that by doing that, the probability of me convincing a lot of people is very low, right? I mean, this isn't going to be like, I'm not going to get a dozen emails of libertarians that are like, oh, after that one debate with you, I just started to really rethink my things. I mean, I'm sure of the thousands of people that watched it, there was maybe a few who really started to rethink things, but you never know how people are going to be convinced, right? I mean, some people might watch that debate and say, oh, well, because of almost like pure volume 2v1 debate, like I think that they did a little bit of a better job, right? Oh no, did Josiah?
Did I lose you guys?
You closed out for a second there.
What the hell was that? Oh, I just resized
but anyway,
the screen.
No, I was just going to say that I think that like it's easy for me to look at the Tim Pool comment section and see like so many people just shitting on me, because it's like, there's just nothing I could say that would change those people's minds. But similarly, people on my side who watch that debate have a totally different perspective. Of course, I happen to think that, they're right and Tim Pool's audience is wrong. But we're just in such a polarized time that, the one thing I can appreciate about what Tim Pool said with regard to his legal, essentially this argument of like, look, we just kind of decide what the laws are and it depends on who gets elected. That's how it is. It's like, look, I mean, that is how it is. Right. Yeah. And, I hope that the next Democratic president who takes office agrees with
page
you.
Out of that book. Yeah. And it's one of those things like,
we'll see who wins.
Even on like the court thing, like it's funny, like again, like, Pisco's told me before, and he's even said it recently in a conversation with somebody else. I'm like, dude, I'm catching strays. I'm not even in this fucking conversation. I was just watching it. He's like, Josiah is inconsistent on the Supreme Court. I'm fucking not. Like, if you actually watch my content, even in the age of Trump, though I am
me and grateful, Josiah cast iron consistency
100%,
on the Supreme Court.
100%. Like, you and I are not obligated to say that, the Supreme Court's always wrong, or that we don't think that there should be some sort of judicial check on the other branches. My position is I still believe that the Supreme Court should be the weakest of the three branches. I do believe that. And to the extent that, I like that the court is pushing back on Trump, yes, I think that's good. But my position has not changed on this. Like, yes, because I agree with the courts in particular instances doesn't mean that my view about the power of the court, the relative status of the court has changed at all. And I've also said, to the extent that I believe in, or to the extent that I would support judicial review as most people accept it, and I'm sorry, I think that it is judicial supremacy, the way that most people interpret judicial review, I would have a much easier time with that if there were democratic checks on the judiciary as well, like term limits, like recall elections, or like supermajority requirements to make things unconstitutional, or, binding codes of conduct, right? Like, if we're going to empower 9 unelected philosopher kings who serve for life, then they should be held to the highest fucking ethical standards. Like, they should be forensically audited twice a fucking year, under the pains and penalties of jail time if they fudge the numbers on this. Like, I'm not inconsistent at all on this. And it's just, it's one of those things that my position has just not changed on this whatsoever. And I don't know, like
he's lying on your name.
My cat is tearing down a divider because I haven't fed them yet, so I gotta get going here.
Hey, so we'll wrap up. Is it your birthday? Chad's saying that it's your birthday.
No, I don't know where they're getting that idea.
Oh,
I saw somebody say that. I'm like, oh, it's not me.
No, well then
we're
going to wish you a happy birthday, but I guess instead, fuck you. We're not going to.
That's right.
Okay.
Listen, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. The last thing I'll say, Econo Boys, you really need to watch Andor. You really do.
I will watch the show that you recommended.
Yeah, I'll watch the show. I'll watch
Mr. In Between. I got it bookmarked here.
If you watch Andor,
To Josiah's point, there's a lot of good. Like I said, I've got to finish The Last of Us. There's The Handmaid's Tale. Andor will make it in as well. Okay, I'll be sure to watch Andor. Now that you guys have told me it's a series finale, and I don't have to wait 3 fucking years for the next season to come out because this is the last episode, I'm much more willing to watch Andor at this point. I did the same thing with Game of Thrones. I didn't watch Game of Thrones until season 7 started. Okay, like I was like, I know the show's good. I'm just gonna wait 10 years until the fucking show's almost over. And it turns out I started at perhaps the best time because that was the best part of Game of Thrones. So I'll watch Andor at some point.
All right. Well, then, fellas, we'll talk next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we have another lady guest.
Who is it, Josiah?
I'm 99.9% sure it's Kyla.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it was. Oh, never mind.
No, maybe it was Silly Serious. Maybe it was Joe.
Pretty sure it was Joanna.
Well,
let's just have both
it's
of them
one
on.
the
Why
two of
not?
them. No, because they deserve their own space. You fucking sexist. Anyway.
Well, let's just have them on. I've been trying. You guys have ignored this message. I'll tell the audience about this. Okay. I have said that we should have an episode, and it's kind of a joke, but we all have significant others, right? A live and learn. Only the ladies, though. Only the lady live and learners. It's just our 4 significant others on the show, guys. Why not?
I actually kind of like that idea, to be honest with you, but I gotta go.